people. Let them toil and swinken, and labor, and plough the land, and take wives of themselves. Nay, I know him not. I have learned it by looking from my own chamber window and marking these poor monks of the priory, their weary life, their profitless round. I have asked myself if the best which can be done with virtue is to shut it within high walls as though it was some savage creature. If the good will lock themselves up, and if the wicked will still wander free, then alas for the world. Alleyne looked at her in astonishment, for her cheek was flushed, her eyes gleaming, and her whole pose full of eloquence and conviction. Yet in an instant she had changed again to her old expression of merriment leavened with mischief. "Wilt do what I ask?" said she. "What is it, lady?" "In what?" "In saying, if he asks, that it was south of the Christchurch Road that I met you. I shall be shut up with the tire women else, and have a week of spindle and bodkin, when I would fain be galloping troubadour up Wilverley Walk, or loosing little Roland at the Vinny Ridge Herons. I shall not answer him if he ask." "But, lady," cried poor Alleyne in great distress, "how can I say that it was to the south of the road, when I know well that it was 4 miles to the north?" "You will not say it. Surely you will not, too, when you know that it is not so." "Oh, I weary of your preaching," she cried, and swept away with a toss of her beautiful head, leaving Alleyne as cast down and ashamed as though he had himself proposed some infamous thing. She was back again in an instant, however, in another of her varying moods. "A sorry shepherd," said Alleyne humbly, "but here is your noble father, and you shall see how worthy a pupil I am. Father, I am much beholden to this young clerk, who was of service to me and helped me this very morning in Minstead Woods, 4 miles to the north of the Christchurch Road, where I had no call to be, you having ordered it otherwise." All this she reeled off in a loud voice, and then glanced with sidelong, questioning eyes at Alleyne for his approval. Sir Nigel, who had entered the room with a silvery-haired old lady upon his arm, stared aghast at this sudden outburst of candour. "And here in good time comes my lady, without whose counsel it is not my wont to decide aught of import. But, indeed, it was her own thought that you should come. For I have formed a good opinion of you, and can see that you are one who may be trusted," said the lady lowing. "And in good sooth my dear lord hath need of such a one by his side, for he recks so little of himself that there should be one there to look to his needs and meet his wants. You have seen the cloisters. It were well that you should see the world too, and you make choice alike between them. It was for that very reason that my father willed that I should come forth into the world at my 20th year," said Alleyne. "Then your father was a man of good counsel," said she, "and you cannot carry out his will better than by going on this path, where all that is noble and gallant in England will be your companions. You can ride?" asked Sir Nigel, looking at the youth with puckered eyes. "Yes, I have ridden much at the Abbey. Yet there is a difference betwixt a friar's hack and a warrior's destrich. You can sing and play on citole, flute, and rebec. Good. You can read blazonry. Indifferent well. Then read this," quoth Sir Nigel, pointing upwards to one of the many quarterings which adorned the wall over the fireplace. "Argent," Alleyne answered, "a fess as your charge with 3 lozenges dividing 3 mullet sable. Over all, on an escutcheon of the first, a jam gules." "A jam gules erased," said Sir Nigel, shaking his head solemnly. "Yet it is not amiss for a monk-bred man. I trust that you are lowly and serviceable." "I have served all my life, my lord." "Canst carve too?" "I have carved 2 days a week for the brethren." "A mortal truly. Wilt make a squire of squires. But tell me, I pray, canst curl hay?" "No, my lord, but I could learn." "It is of import," said he, "for I love to keep my hair well ordered, seeing that the weight of my helmet for 30 years hath in some degree frayed it upon the top." He pulled off his velvet cap of maintenance as he spoke, and displayed a pate which was as bold as an egg, and shone bravely in the firelight. "You see," said he, whisking round, and showing one little strip where a line of scattered haze, like the last survivors in some fatal field, still barely held their own against the fate which had fallen upon their comrades. These locks need some little oiling and curling, for I doubt not that if you look slantwise at my head, when the light is good, you will yourself perceive that there are places where the hair is sparse. It is for you also to bear the post, said the lady, for my sweet lord is of so free and gracious a temper that he would give it gaily to the first who asked alms of him. All these things, with some knowledge of venery, and of the management of horse, hawk, and hound, with the grace and hardihood and courtesy which are proper to your age, will make you a fit squire for Sir Nigel Loring. Alas, lady, Alleyne answered, I know well the great honour that you have done me in deeming me worthy to wait upon so renowned a knight, yet I am so conscious of my own weakness that I scarce dare incur duties which I might be so ill-fitted to fulfil. Modesty and a humble mind, said she, are the very first and rarest gifts in page or squire. Your words prove that you have these, and all the rest is but the work of use and time. But there is no call for haste. Rest upon it for the night, and let your orisons ask for guidance in the matter. We knew your father well, and would fain help his son, though we have small cause to love your brother the Sockman, who is forever stirring up strife in the county. We can scarce hope, said Nigel, to have all ready for our start before the feast of St. Luke, for there is much to be done in the time. You will have leisure, therefore, if it please you to take service under me, in which to learn your devoir. Bertrand, my daughter's page, is hot to go, but in sooth he is over young for such rough work as may be before us. And I have one favour to crave from you, added the lady of the castle, as Alleyne turned to leave their presence. You have, as I understand, much learning which you have acquired at Beaulieu. Little enough, lady, compared with those who were my teachers. Yet enough for my purpose, I doubt not. For I would have you give an hour or two a day whilst you are with us in discoursing with my daughter, the Lady Maud, for she is somewhat backward, I fear, and hath no love for letters, save for these poor fond romances, which do but fill her empty head with dreams of enchanted maidens and of errant cavaliers. Father Christopher comes over afternoons from the priory, but he is stricken with years and slow of speech, so that she gets small profit from his teaching. I would have you do what you can with her, and with Agatha my young tire-woman, and with Dorothy Piepant. And so Alleyne found himself not only chosen as squire to a knight, but also as squire to 3 damosels, which was even further from the part which he had thought to play in the world. Yet he could but agree to do what he might, and so went forth from the castle hall with his face flushed and his head in a whirl at the thought of the strange and perilous paths which his feet were destined to tread. And now there came a time of stir and bustle, of furbishing of arms and clang of hammer from all the Southland counties. Far spread the tiding from thorpe to thorpe and from castle to castle, that the old game was afoot once more, and the lions and lilies to be in the field with the early spring. Great news is for that fierce old country, whose trade for a generation had been war, her exports archers and her imports prisoners. For 6 years the sons had chafed under an unwonted peace. Now they flew to their arms as to their birthright. The old soldiers of Cressy, of Nogent, and of Poictiers were glad to think that they might hear the war trumpet once more, and gladder still were the hot youth who had chafed for years under the martial tales of their sires. To pierce the great mountains of the south, to fight the tamers of the fiery maze, to follow the greatest captain of the age, to find sunny cornfields and vineyards, when the marches of Picardy and Normandy were as rare and bleak as the Jedburgh forests, here was a golden prospect for a race of warriors. From sea to sea there was stringing of boughs in the cottage and clang of steel in the castle. Nor did it take long for every stronghold to pour forth its cavalry, and every hamlet its footmen. Through the late autumn and the early winter every road and country lane resounded with nacker and trumpet, with the neigh of the war-horse and the clatter of marching men. From the Wrekin in the Welsh marches to the Cotswolds in the west or Butser in the south, there was no hilltop from which the peasant might not have seen the bright shimmer of arms, the toss and flutter of plume and of pencil. From bypath, from woodland clearing, or from winding moorside track, these little rivulets of steel united in the larger roads to form a broader stream, growing ever full and larger as it approached the nearest or most commodious seaport. And there all day, and day after day, there was bustle and crowding and labor, while the great ships loaded up, and one after the other spread their white pinions and darted off to the open sea, amid the clash of cymbals and rolling of drums and lusty shouts of those who went and of those who waited. From Orwell to the Dart there was no port which did not send forth its little fleet, gay with streamer and bunting, as for a joyous festival. Thus in the season of the waning days the might of England put forth onto the waters. In the ancient and populous county of Hampshire there was no lack of leaders or of soldiers for service which promised either honour or profit. In the north the Saracen's Head of the Brocas and the Scarlet Fish of the Derush were waving over a strong body of archers from Holt, Woolmer, and Harewood forests. De Borhunty was up in the east, and Sir John de Montague in the west. Sir Luke de Ponings, Sir Thomas West, Sir Maurice de Bruin, Sir Arthur Lipscomb, Sir Walter Ramsay, and stout Sir Oliver Butterstone were all marching south with levies from Andover, Alresford, Odium, and Winchester, while from Sussex came Sir John Clinton, Sir Thomas Cheney, and Sir John Fallislee, with a troop of picked men-at-arms making for their port at Southampton. Greatest of all the musters, however, was that of Twynham Castle, for the name and the fame of Sir Nigel Loring drew towards him the keenest and boldest spirits, all eager to serve under so valiant a leader. Archers from the New Forest and the Forest of Beer, bill men from the pleasant country which is watered by the Stour, the Avon, and the Itchen, young cavaliers from the ancient Hampshire houses, all were pushing for Christchurch to take service under the banner of the 5 Scarlet Roses. And now, could Sir Nigel have shown the bushels of land which the laws of rank required, he might well have cut his forked pennon into a square banner, and taken such a following into the field as would have supported the dignity of a banneret. But poverty was heavy upon him. His land was scant, his coffers empty, and the very castle which covered him the holding of another. Sore was his heart when he saw rare bowmen and war-hardened spearmen turned away from his gates, for the lack of the money which might equip and pay them. Yet the letter which Aylward had brought him gave him powers which he was not slow to use. In it Sir Claude Latier, the Gascon lieutenant of the White Company, assured him that there remained in his keeping enough to fit out 100 archers and 20 men-at-arms, which, joined to the 300 veteran companions already in France, would make a force which any leader might be proud to command. Carefully and sagaciously the veteran knight chose out his men from the swarm of volunteers. Many an anxious consultation he held with Black Simon, Sam Aylward, and other of his more experienced followers, as to who should come and who should stay. By All Saints' Day, however, ere the last leaves had flooded to earth in the Wilverley and Holmesley glades, he had filled up his full numbers, and mustered under his banner as stout a following of Hampshire foresters as ever twanged their war bows. 20 men-at-arms, 2, well mounted and equipped, formed the cavalry of the party, while young Peter Turlake of Fareham and Walter Ford of Butley, the martial sons of martial sires, came at their own cost to wait upon Sir Nigel and to share with Alleyne Edricson the duties of his squireship. Yet, even after the enrolment, there was much to be done ere the party could proceed upon its way. For armour, swords, and lances, there was no need to take much forethought, for they were to be both better and cheaper in Bordeaux than in England. With the longbow, however, it was different. Yew staves indeed might be got in Spain, but it was well to take enough and to spare with them. Then 3 spare cords should be carried for each bow, with a great store of arrowheads, besides a brigandines of chain mail, the wadded steel caps, and the brassarts or arm guards, which were the proper equipment of the archer. Above all, the women for miles round were hard at work cutting the white surcoats, which were the badge of the company, and adorning them with the red lion of St. George upon the centre of the breast. When all was completed, and the muster called in the castle yard, the oldest soldier of the French wars was fain to confess that he had never looked upon a better equipped or more warlike body of men, from the old knight with his silk jupon, sitting his great black war-horse in the front of them, to Hordle John, the giant recruit, who leaned carelessly upon a huge black bowstave in the rear. Of the 60, fully half had seen service before, while a fair sprinkling were men who had followed the wars all their lives, and had a hand in those battles which had made the whole world ring with the fame and the wonder of the island infantry. 6 long weeks were taken in these preparations, and it was close on Martinmas ere all was ready for a start. Nigh 2 months had Alleyne Edricson been in Castle Twynham, months which were fated to turn the whole current of his life, to divert it from the dark and lonely bourne towards which it tended, and to guide it into freer and more sunlit channels. Already he had learned to bless his father for that wise provision which had made him seek to know the world ere he had ventured to renounce it, for it was a different place from that which he had pictured. very different from that which he had heard described when the master of the novices held forth to his charges upon the ravening wolves who lurked for them beyond the peaceful folds of Beaulieu. There was cruelty in it, doubtless, and lust and sin and sorrow, but were there not virtues to atone, robust positive virtues which did not shrink from temptation, which held their own in all the rough blasts of the workaday world? How colorless by contrast appeared the sinlessness which came from inability to sin, the conquest which was attained by flying from the enemy. Monk-bred as he was, Alleyne had native shrewdness and a mind which was young enough to form new conclusions and to outgrow old ones. He could not fail to see that the men with whom he was thrown in contact, rough-tongued, fierce and quarrelsome as they were yet of deeper nature and of more service in the world than the ox-eyed brethren who rose and ate and slept from year's end to year's end in their own narrow, stagnant circle of existence. Abbot Burghersh was a good man, but how was he better than this kindly knight, who lived as simple a life, held as lofty and inflexible an ideal of duty, and did with all his fearless heart whatever came to his hand to do? In turning from the service of the one to that of the other, Alleyne could not feel that he was lowering his aims in life. True that his gentle and thoughtful nature recoiled from the grim work of war, yet in those days of martial orders and militant brotherhoods there was no goal fixed betwixt the priest and the soldier. The man of God and the man of the sword might without scandal be united in the same individual. Why then should he, a mere clerk, have scruples when so fair a chance lay in his way of carrying out the spirit, as well as the letter of his father's provision? Much struggle it cost him, anxious spirit questionings and midnight prayings, with many a doubt and a misgiving. But the issue was that ere he had been 3 days in Castle Twynham, he had taken service under Sir Nigel and had accepted horse and harness, the same to be paid for out of his share of the profits of the expedition. Henceforth, for 7 hours a day, he strove in the tilt-yard to qualify himself to be a worthy squire to so worthy a knight. Young, supple and active, with all the pent energy from years of pure and healthy living, it was not long before he could manage his horse and his weapon well enough to earn an approving nod from critical men-at-arms, or to hold his own against Turlake and Ford, his fellow-servitors. But were there no other considerations which swayed him from the cloisters towards the world? So complex is the human spirit that it can itself scarce discern the deep springs which impel it to action. Yet to Alleyne had been opened now a side of life of which he had been as innocent as a child, but one which was of such deep import that it could not fail to influence him in choosing his path. A woman, in monkish precepts, had been the embodiment and concentration of what was dangerous and evil, a focus when spread all that was to be dreaded and avoided. So defiling was their presence that a true Cistercian might not raise his eyes to their face or touch their fingertips under ban of church, and fear of deadly sin. Yet here, day after day for an hour after nones, and for an hour before vespers, he found himself in close communion with 3 maidens, all young, all fair, and all therefore doubly dangerous from a monkish standpoint. Yet he found that in their presence he was conscious of a quick sympathy, a pleasant ease, a ready response to all that was most gentle and best in himself, which filled his soul with a vague and new-found joy. And yet the Lady Maud Loing was no easy pupil to handle. An older and more world-wise man might have been puzzled by her varying moods, her sudden prejudices, her quick resentment at all constraint and authority. Did a subject interest her, was there space in it for either romance or imagination, she would fly through it with a subtle, active mind, leaving her 2 fellow students and even her teacher toiling behind her. On the other hand, with their dull patience needed with steady toil and strain of memory, no single fact could by any driving be fixed in her mind. Alleyne might talk to her of the stories of old gods and heroes, of gallant deeds and lofty aims, or he might hold forth upon moon and stars, and let his fancy wander over the hidden secrets of the universe, and he would have a rapt listener with flushed cheeks and eloquent eyes, who could repeat out in the very words which had fallen from his lips. But when it came to almigest and astrolabe, the counting of figures and reckoning of epicycles, away would go her thoughts to horse and hound, and a vacant eye and listless face would warn the teacher that he had lost his hold upon his scholar. Then he had but to bring out the old romance book from the priory, with befingered cover of sheepskin and gold letters upon a purple ground, to entice a wayward mind back to the paths of learning. At times, too, when the wild fit was upon her, she would break into pertness and rebel openly against Alleyne's gentle firmness. Yet he would jog quietly on with his teachings, taking no heed to her mutiny, until suddenly she would be conquered by his patience and break into self-revilings 100 times stronger than her fault demanded. It chanced, however, that, on one of these mornings when the evil mood was upon her, Agatha, the young tirewoman, thinking to please her mistress, began also to toss her head and make tart rejoinder to the teacher's questions. In an instant, the Lady Maud had turned upon her 2 blazing eyes and a face which was blanched with anger. She had spoken with a rising voice, and a clasping and opening of her long white fingers, so that it was no marvel that ere the speech was over the skirts of Agatha were whisking round the door and the click of her sobs to be heard dying swiftly away down the corridor. Alleyne stayed open-eyed at this tigress who had sprung so suddenly to his rescue. "There is no need for such anger," he said mildly. "The maid's words have done me no scath. It is you yourself who have erred." Nay, no one has misused me," he answered, "but the fault lies in your hot and bitter words. You have called her a baggage and a lack-brain, and I know not what. And you taught me to speak the truth," she cried. "Now I have spoken it, and yet I cannot please you. Lack-brain she is, and lack-brain I shall call her." What was he? A younger son, a penniless clerk, a squire unable to pay for his own harness, that he should dare to raise his eyes to the fairest maid in Hampshire? So spake reason. But, in spite of all, her voice was ever in his ears and her image in his heart. Stronger than reason, stronger than cloister teachings, stronger than all that might hold him back, was an old tyrant who will brook no rival in the kingdom of youth. And yet it was a surprise and a shock to himself to find how deeply she had entered into his life, how completely those vague ambitions and yearnings which had filled his spiritual nature centered themselves now upon this thing of earth. He had scarce dared to face the change which had come upon him, when a few sudden chance words showed it all up hard and clear, like a lightning flash in the darkness. "Tell me, Alleyne Edricson," he broke out suddenly, as they clattered along the winding track which leads over the Bournemouth hills, "has it not seemed to you that of late the Lady Maud is paler and more silent than is her wont?" "It may be so," the other answered shortly, "and would rather sit distray by her oriel than ride gaily to the chase as of old. Methinks, Alleyne, it is this learning which you have taught her that has taken all the life and sap from her. It is more than she can master, like a heavy spear to a light rider." "Her lady mother has so ordered it," said Alleyne. Alleyne said nothing, but his heart seemed to turn to a lump of ice in his bosom. "My father has broad acres," the other continued, "from Fareham Creek to the slope of the Portsdown Hill. There is filling of granges, hewing of wood, malting of grain, and herding of sheep as much as heart could wish, and I the only son. Sure am I that Sir Nigel would be blithe at such a match." "But how of the lady?" asked Alleyne, with dry lips. "Nay, I cannot say," said Alleyne, with a wild throb of sudden hope in his heart. "I have thought so, and yet I cannot name the man. Indeed, save myself, and Walter Ford, and you, who are half a clerk, and Father Christopher of the Priory, and Bertrand the page, who is there whom she sees?" "I cannot tell," quoth Alleyne shortly, and the 2 squires rode on again, each intent upon his own thoughts. Next day at morning lesson, the teacher observed that his pupil was indeed looking pale and jaded, with listless eyes and a weary manner. He was heavy-hearted to note the grievous change in her. "Your mistress, I fear, is ill, Agatha," he said to the tirewoman, when the Lady Maud had sought her chamber. The maid looked aslant at him with laughing eyes. "It is not an illness that kills," quoth she. "Methinks that I could lay my hand upon another who is smitten with the same trouble," said she, with the same sidelong look. "Canst not give a name to it, and thou so skilled in leechcraft?" "Nay, save that she seems a-weary." "Well, bethink you that it is but 3 days ere you will all be gone, and Castle Twinnerby as dull as the Priory. Is there not enough there to cloud a lady's brow?" "In sooth, yes," he answered. "I had forgot that she is about to lose her father." Behind were the little clump of steel-clad horsemen, their lances raised, with long pencils drooping down the oaken shafts. So silent and still were they, that they might have been metal-sheathed statues, were it not for the occasional quick, impatient stamp of their chargers, or the rattle of chamfering against neck plates as they tossed and strained. A spear's length in front of them sat the spare and long-limbed figure of Black Simon, the Norwich fighting man, his face, deep-lined face framed in steel, and the silk guidon marked with the 5 scarlet roses slanting over his right shoulder. All round, in the edge of the circle of the light, stood the castle servants, the soldiers who would have formed the garrison, and little knots of women, who sobbed in their aprons and called shrilly to their namesaints to watch over the what, or Will, or Peterkin who had turned his hand to the work of war. The young squire was leaning forward, gazing at the stirring and martial scene, when he heard a short, quick gasp at his shoulder, and there was the Lady Maud, with her hand to her heart, leaning up against the wall, slender and fair, like a half-plucked lily. Her face was turned away from him, but he could see, by the sharp intake of her breath, that she was weeping bitterly. "Alas, alas," he cried, all unnerved at the sight. "Why is it that you are so sad, lady?" "It is the sight of these brave men," she answered, "and to think how many of them go and how few are like to find their way back. I have seen it before, when I was a little maid, in the year of the prince's great battle. I remember then how they mustered in the bailey, even as they do now, and my lady mother holding me in her arms at this very window that I might see the show. Please God, you will see them all back ere another year be out," said he. Twice she opened her lips, and twice no sound came from them. At last she spoke in a hard and measured voice, as one who dared not trust herself to speak too freely. "This is over sudden," she said. "It is not so long since the world was nothing to you. You have changed once, perchance you may change again." "Cruel," he cried, "who hath changed me?" "And then your brother," she continued with a little laugh, disregarding his question. "Methinks this had become a family custom amongst the Edricsons. Nay, I am sorry, I did not mean a jibe. But, indeed, Alleyne, this had come suddenly upon me, and I scarce know what to say. Say some word of hope, however distant, some kind word that I may cherish in my heart." "Nay, Alleyne, it were a cruel kindness, and you have been too good and true a friend to me that I should use you despitefully. There cannot be a closer link between us. It is madness to think of it. Were there no other reasons, it is enough that my father and your brother would both cry out against it. Come, Alleyne, was it not you who would have me act fairly to all men, and, certes, to my father amongst them?" Her eyes softened upon him, and a kind answer was on her lips, when a hoarse shout, with a clatter of arms and stamping of steeds, rose up from the bailey below. At the sound her face set, her eyes sparkled, and she stood with flushed cheek and head thrown back, a woman's body, with a soul afire. The raw morning had broken ere the hot spiced ale had been served round and the last fee well spoken. A cold wind blew up from the sea, and ragged clouds drifted swiftly across the sky. The Christchurch townsfolk stood huddled about the bridge of Avon, the women pulling tight their shawls and the men swathing themselves in their gabardines, while down the winding path from the castle came the van of the little army, their feet clanging on the hard, frozen road. First came Black Simon with his banner, bestriding a lean and powerful dapple-grey charger, as hard and wiry and war-wise as himself. After him, riding 3 abreast, were 9 men-at-arms, all picked soldiers, who had followed the French wars before, and knew the marches of Picardy as they knew the downs of their native Hampshire. They were armed to the teeth with lance, sword, and mace, with square shields notched to the upper right-hand corner to serve as a spear rest. For defense each man wore a coat of interlaced leathern thongs, strengthened at the shoulder, elbow, and upper arm with slips of steel. Greaves and knee-pieces were also of leather backed by steel, and their gauntlets and shoes were of iron plates, craftily jointed. So, with jingle of arms and clatter of hoofs, they rode across the bridge of Avon, while the burghers shouted lustily for the flag of the 5 Roses and its gallant guard. After them came 27 sumpter horses carrying tent poles, cloth, spare arms, spurs, wedges, cooking kettles, horseshoes, bags of nails, and the 100 other things which experience had shown to be needful in a harried and hostile country. A white mule with red trappings, led by a varlet, carried Sir Nigel's own napery and table comforts. Then came 20 more archers, 10 more men-at-arms, and finally a rearguard of 20 bowmen, with Big John towering in the front rank and the veteran Elwood marching by the side, his battered harness and faded surcoat in strange contrast with the snow-white dewpounds and shining brigandines of his companions. A quick crossfire of greetings and questions and rough West Saxon jests flew from rank to rank, or were banded about betwixt the marching archers and the gazing crowd. "Ola, Gaffer Higginson!" cried Aylward, as he spied the portly figure of the village innkeeper. "No more of thy nut-brown Mongal. We leave it behind us." "By St. Paul, no," cried the other. "You take it with you. Devil a drop have you left in the great Kilderkin. It was time for you to go. If your cask is lay, I warrant your purse is full. Gaffer," shouted Hordlejohn, "see that you lay in good store the best for our homecoming." "See that you keep your throat whole for the drinking of it, Archer," cried a voice, and the crowd laughed at the rough pleasantry. "If you will warrant the beer, I will warrant the throat," said John composedly. The company had marched to the turn of the road ere Sir Nigel Loring rode out from the gateway, mounted on Pommers, his great black warhorse, whose ponderous footfall on the wooden drawbridge echoed loudly from a gloomy arch which spanned it. Sir Nigel was still in his velvet dress of peace, with flat velvet cap of maintenance, and curling ostrich feather clasp in a golden brooch. To his 3 squires riding behind him, it looked as though he bore the bird's egg as well as its feather, for the back of his bald pate shone like a globe of ivory. "I trust that there is nothing forgot," she said, beckoning to Alleyne to ride on her further side. "I trust him to you, Edricson. Hosen, shirts, cyclists, and under-dewpounds are in the brown basket on the left side of the mule. His wine he takes hot when the nights are cold, Malvoisie or Vernage, with as much spice as would cover the thumbnail. See that he the change if he come back hot from the tilting. There is goose grease in a box, if the old scars ache at the turn of the weather. Let his blankets be dry and—" "The purse I have already given you, Edricson," continued the lady. "They are in it 23 marks, 1 noble, 3 shillings and 4pence, which is a great treasure for one man to carry. And I pray you to bear in mind, Edricson, that he hath 2 pair of shoes, those of red leather for common use, and the others with golden toe chains, which he may wear should he chance to drink wine with the prince or with Chandos." "My sweet bird," said Sir Nigel, "I am right loath to part from you, but we are now at the fringe of the forest, and it is not right that I should take the chatelaine too far from her trust." "But oh, my dear lord," she cried with a trembling lip, "let me bide with you for 1 furlong further, or 1.5 perhaps. You may spare me this out of the weary miles that you will journey along." "Come, then, my heart's comfort," he answered, "but I must crave a gage from thee. It is my custom, dealing, and have been since I have first known thee, to proclaim by herald in such camps, townships, or fortalices as I may chance to visit, that my lady-love, being beyond compare the fairest and sweetest in Christendom, I should deem it great honour and kindly condescension if any cavalier would run 3 courses against me with sharpened lances, should he chance to have a lady whose claim he was willing to advance. I pray you then, my fair dove, that you will vouchsafe to me one of those doeskin gloves, that I may wear as a badge of her whose servant I shall ever be." "Alack and alas for the fairest and sweetest," she cried. "Fair and sweet I would fain be for your dear sake, my lord, but old I am and ugly, and the knights would laugh should you lay lance and rest in such a cause." The Lady Mary Loring slipped her hand from her yellow leather gauntlet, and he, lifting it with dainty reverence, bound it to the front of his velvet cap. "It is with mine other guardian angels," quoth he, pointing at the saint's medals which hung beside it. "And now, my dearest, you have come far now. May the Virgin guard and prosper thee. 1 kiss." He bent down from his saddle, and then, striking spurs into his horse's sides, he galloped at top speed after his men, with his 3 squires at his heels. Half a mile further, where the road topped a hill, they looked back, and the Lady Mary on her white palfrey was still where they had left her. A moment later they were on the downward slope, and she had vanished from their view. Chapter 14. How Sir Nigel sought for a wayside venture. For a time Sir Nigel was very moody and downcast, with bent brows and eyes upon the pommel of his saddle. Edricson and Turlake rode behind him in little better case, while Ford, a careless and light-hearted youth, grinned at the melancholy of his companions, and flourished his lord's heavy spear, making a point to right and a point to left, as though he were a paladin contending against a host of assailants. Sir Nigel happened, however, to turn himself in his saddle. Ford instantly became as stiff and as rigid as though he had been struck with a palsy. The four rode alone, for the archers had passed a curve in the road, though Alleyne could still hear the heavy clump of their marching, or catch a glimpse of the sparkle of steel through the tangle of leafless branches. "Ride by my side, friends, I entreat of you," said the knight, reining in his steed that they might come abreast of him. "For, since it hath pleased you to follow me to the wars, it were well that you should know how you may best serve me. I doubt not, Turlake, that you will show yourself a worthy son of a valiant father, and you, Ford, of yours, and you, Edricson, that you are mindful of the old-time house from which all men know that you are sprung. And first I would have you bear very steadfastly in mind that our setting forth is by no means for the purpose of gaining spoil or exacting ransom, though it may well happen that such may come to us also. We go to France, and from thence I trust to Spain, in humble search of a field in which we may win advancement and perchance some small share of glory. For this purpose I would have you know that it is not my wont to let any occasion pass where it is in any way possible that honor may be gained. I would have you bear this in mind, and give great heed to it that you may bring me word of all cartels, challenges, wrongs, tyrannies, infamies, and wronging of damsels. Nor is any occasion too small to take note of, for I have known such trifles as the dropping of a gauntlet or the flicking of a breadcrumb, when well and properly followed up, lead to a most noble spear-running. But, Edricson, do I not see a cavalier who rides down yonder road amongst the nether shore? It would be well, perchance, that you should give him greeting from me. And, should he be of gentle blood, it may be that he would care to exchange thrusts with me." "Why, my lord," quoth Ford, standing in his stirrups and shading his eyes, "it is old Hob Davidson, the fat miller of Milton." "Ow! So it is, indeed," said Sir Nigel, puckering his cheeks. "But wayside ventures are not to be scorned, for I have seen no finer passages than are to be had from such chance meetings, when cavaliers are willing to advance themselves. I can well remember that 2 leagues from the town of Rheims I met a very valiant and courteous cavalier of France, with whom I had gentle and most honourable contention for upwards of an hour. It hath ever grieved me that I had not his name, for he smote upon me with a mace and went upon his way ere I was in condition to have much speech with him, but his arms were an Illyrian in chief above of Fess Ezio. I was also on such an occasion thrust through the shoulder by Leon de Montcourt, whom I met on the high road betwixt Libourne and Bordeaux. I met him but the once, but I have never seen a man for whom I bear a greater love and esteem. And so also with the squire Labourg Capulet, who would have been a very valiant captain had he lived." "He is dead, then?" asked Alleyne Edricson. "Alas, it was my ill fate to slay him in a bickering which broke out in a field near the township of Tarbes. I cannot call to mind how the thing came about, for it was in the year of the prince's ride through Languedoc, when there was much fine skirmishing to be had at Barriers. By St. Paul, I do not think that any honourable cavalier could ask for better chance of advancement than might be had by spurring forth before the army and riding to the gateways of Narbonne, or Bergerac, or Montgiscard, where some courteous gentleman would ever be at wait to do what he might to meet your wish, or ease you of your vow. Such a one at Veneder ran 3 courses with me betwixt daybreak and sunrise, to the great exultation of his lady." "And did you slay him also, my lord?" asked Ford with reverence. "I could never learn, for he was carried within the barrier, and as I had chanced to break the bone of my leg, it was a great unease for me to ride, or even to stand. Yet, by the goodness of heaven and the pious intercession of the valiant St. George, I was able to sit my charger in the ruffle of Poictiers, which was no very long time afterwards. But what have we here? A very fair and courtly maiden, or I mistake." It was indeed a tall and buxom country lass, with a basket of spinach leaves upon her head, and a great slab of bacon tucked under one arm. She bobbed a frightened curtsy as Sir Nigel swept his velvet hat from his head and reined up his great charger. "God be with thee, fair maiden," said he. God guard thee, my lord, she answered, speaking in the broadest West Saxon speech, and balancing herself first on one foot and then on the other in her bashfulness. Fear not, my fair damsel, said Sir Nigel, but tell me if perchance a poor and most unworthy knight can in any wise be of service to you. Should it chance that you are being used despitefully, it may be that I may obtain justice for you. Lork no, kind sir, she answered, clutching her bacon the tighter, as though some design upon it might be it under this knightly offer. I be the milking wench o' Farmer Arnold, and he be as kind a maester as heart could wish. It is well, said he, and with a shake of the bridle rode on down the woodland path. I would have you bear in mind, he continued to his squires, that gentle courtesy is not, as is the base use of so many false knights, to be shown only to maidens of high degree. For there is no woman so humble that a true knight may not listen to her tale of wrong. But here comes a cavalier who is indeed in haste. Perchance it would be well that we should ask him whither he rides, for it may be that he is one who desires to advance himself in chivalry. The bleak, hard, wind-swept road dipped down in front of them into a little valley, and then, writhing up the heathy slope upon the other side, lost itself among the gaunt pine trees. Far away between the black lines of trunks, the quick glitter of steel marked where the company pursued its way. To the north stretched the tree country, but to the south, between two swelling downs, a glimpse might be caught of the cold grey shimmer of the sea, with a white fleck of a galley sail upon the distant skyline. Just in front of the travelers a horseman was urging his steed up the slope, driving it on with whip and spur as one who rides for a set purpose. As he clattered up, Alleyne could see that the roan horse was grey with dust and flecked with foam, as though it had left many a mile behind it. The rider was a stern-faced man, hard of mouth and dry of eye, with a heavy sword clanking at his side, and a stiff white bundle swathed in linen balanced across the pommel of his saddle. "Not so loudly, friend," quoth the little knight, reining his horse half round to bar the path. "I have myself been the king's man for 30 years or more, but I have not been wont to halloo about it on a peaceful highway." "I ride in his service," cried the other, "and I carry that which belongs to him. You bar my path at your peril." "Then must I hew a passage," cried the stranger, with his shoulder braced round and his hand upon his hilt. "I am not to be stopped on the king's service by every gadabout. Should you be a gentleman of quarterings and coat armour, list Sir Nigel, I shall be very blithe to go further into the matter with you. If not, I have 3 very worthy squires, any one of whom would take the thing upon himself, and debate it with you in a very honourable way." The man scowled from one to the other, and his hand stole away from his sword. "We hoped to snare a falcon," said he presently, "but we netted a carrion crow. Mouth for eye, but there are men whose hearts are tougher than a boar's hide. For me, I have played the old game of war since ever I had hair on my chin, and I have seen 10,000 brave men in one day with their faces to the sky, but I swear by him who made me that I cannot abide the work of the butcher." "And yet, my fair lord," said Edricson, "there has, from what I hear, been much of such devil's work in France." "It is a shrine of Our Lady," said Telek, "and a blind beggar who lives by the alms of those who worship there." "You have been blind to much that is goodly and fair," quoth Sir Nigel, "but you have also been spared much that is sorry and foul. This very hour our eyes have been shocked with that which would have left you unmoved. But, by St. Paul, we must on, or our company will think that they have lost their captain somewhat early in the venture. Throw the man my purse, Edricson, and let us go." Alleyne, lingering behind, bethought him of the Lady Loring's counsel, and reduced the noble gift which the knight had so freely bestowed to a single penny, which the beggar with many mumbled blessings thrust away into his wallet. Then, spurring his steed, the young squire rode at the top of his speed after his companions, and overtook them just at the spot where the trees fringe off into the moor and the straggling hamlet of Hordle lies scattered on either side of the winding and deeply rutted track. The company was already well nigh through the village, but as the knight and his squires closed upon them, they heard the clamour of a strident voice, followed by a roar of deep-chested laughter from the ranks of the archers. Another minute brought them up with the regout, where every man marched with his beard on his shoulder, and a face which was agrin with merriment. By the side of the column walked a huge red-headed bowman, with his hands thrown out in argument and expostulation, while close at his heels followed a little wrinkled woman who poured forth a shrill volley of abuse, varied by an occasional thwack from a stick, given with all the force of a body, though she might have been beating one of the forest trees for all the effect that she seemed likely to produce. "I trust, Aylward," said Sir Nigel gravely, as he rode up, "that this doth not mean that any violence have been offered to women. If such a thing happened, I tell you that the man shall hang, though he were the best archer that ever wore brass out." "Whist, mother," said John, looking back at her from the tail of his eye. "I go to France as an archer to give blows and to take them." "To France, quotha," cried the old dame. "Bide here with me, and I shall warrant you more blows than you are like to get in France. If blows be what you seek, you need not go further than Hordle." "What have you to say, you clean-shaved galley-beggar?" cried the fiery dame, turning upon the archer. "Can I not speak with my own son, but you must let your tongue clack? A soldier, quotha, and never a hair on his face. I have seen a better soldier with pap for food and swaddling clothes for harness." "Stand to it, Aylward," cried the archers, amid a fresh burst of laughter. "Do not thwart her, comrade," said Big John. "She is the proper spirit for her years, and cannot abide to be thwarted. It is kindly and homely to me to hear her voice, and to feel that she is behind me. But I must leave you now, mother, for the way is over rough for your feet. But I will bring you back a silken gown, if there be one in France or Spain, and I will bring Ginny a silver penny. So goodbye to you, and God have you in his keeping." Whipping up the little woman, he lifted her lightly to his lips, and then, taking his place in the ranks again, marched on with the laughing company. "That was ever his way," she cried, appealing to Sir Nigel, who reined up his horse and listened with the greatest courtesy. "He would jog on his own road for all that I could do to change him. First he must be a monk, forsooth, and all because a wench was wise enough to turn her back on him. Then he joins a rascally crew and must needs traps off to the wars, and me with no one to bait the fire if I be out, or tend the cow if I be home. Yet I have been a good mother to him. 3 hazel switches a day have I broke across his shoulders, and he takes no more notice than you have seen him today. Doubt not that he will come back to you both safe and prosperous, my fair dame," quoth Sir Nigel. "Meanwhile it grieves me that as I have already given my purse to a beggar up the road, Nay, my lord," said Alleyne, "I still have some moneys remaining." "Then I pray you to give them to this very worthy woman." He cantered on as he spoke, while Alleyne, having dispensed 2 more pence, left the old dame standing by the furthest cottage of Hordle, with a shrill voice raised in blessings instead of revilings. There were 2 crossroads before they reached the Lymington ford, and at each of them Sir Nigel pulled up his horse, and waited with many a curvet and gambad, craning his neck this way and that to see if fortune would send him a venture. Crossroads had, as he explained, been rare places for nightly spear-runnings, and in his youth it was no uncommon thing for a cavalier to abide for weeks at such a point, holding gentle debate with all comers, to his own advancement and the great honour of his lady. The times would change, however, and the forest tracks wound away from them deserted and silent, with no trample of war-horse or clang of armour which might herald the approach of an adversary, so that Sir Nigel rode on his way disconsolate. At the Lymington River they splashed through the ford, and lay in the meadows on the further side to eat the bread and salt meat which they carried upon the sumpter horses. Then, ere the sun was on the slope of the heavens, they had deftly trussed up again, and were swinging merrily upon their way, 200 feet moving like 2. There is a 3rd crossroad where the track from Bouldray runs down to the old fishing village of Pitsteep. Down this, as they came abreast of it, there walked 2 men, the one a pace or 2 behind the other. The cavaliers could not but pull up their horses to look at them, for a stranger pair were never seen journeying together. The first was a misshapen, squalid man with cruel, cunning eyes and a shock of tangled red hair, bearing in his hands a small unpainted cross, which he held high so that all men might see it. He seemed to be in the last extremity of fright, with a face the colour of clay and his limbs all as shake as one who with an ague. Behind him, with his toe ever rasping upon the other's heels, there walked a very stern, black-bearded man with a hard eye and a set mouth. He bore over his shoulder a great knotted stick with 3 jagged nails stuck in the head of it, and from time to time he whirled it up in the air with a quivering arm, as though he could scarce hold back from dashing his companion's brains out. So in silence they walked under the spread of the branches on the grass-grown path from Boldre. "By St. Paul," quoth the knight, "but this is a passing strange sight, and perchance some very perilous and honourable venture may arise from it. I pray you, Edricson, to ride up to them and to ask them the cause of it." There was no need, however, for him to move, for the twain came swiftly towards him until they were within a spear's length, when the man with the cross set himself down sullenly upon a tussock of grass by the wayside, while the other stood beside him with his great cudgel still hanging over his head. So intent was he that he raised his eyes neither to knight nor squires, but kept them ever fixed with a savage glare upon his comrade. "I pray you, friend," said Sir Nigel, "to tell us truthfully who you are, and why you follow this man with such bitter enmity." "So long as I am within the pale of the king's law," the stranger answered, "I cannot see why I should render account to every passing wayfarer." "You are no very shrewd reasoner, fellow," quoth the knight, "for if it be within the law for you to threaten him with your club, then it is also lawful for me to threaten you with my sword." The man with the cross was down in an instant on his knees upon the ground, with hands clasped above him and his face shining with hope. "For dear Christ's sake, my fair lord," he cried in a crackling voice, "I have at my belt a bag with 100 rose nobles, and I will give it to you freely if you will but pass your sword through this man's body." "How, you foul knave!" exclaimed Sir Nigel hotly. "Do you think that a cavalier's arm is to be bought like a packman's way? By St. Paul, I have little doubt that this fellow has some very good cause to hold you in hatred." "Indeed, my fair sir, you speak sooth," quoth he with the club, while the other seated himself once more by the wayside. "For this man is Peter Peterson, a very noted reeve, drolech, and murderer, who has wrought much evil for many years in the parts about Winchester. It was but the other day, upon the feast of the blessed Simon and Jude, that he slew my younger brother William in Beer Forest, for which, by the black thorn of Glastonbury, I shall have his heart's blood, though I walk behind him to the further end of earth. But if this be indeed so, ask Sir Nigel, why is it that you have come with him so far through the forest?" "Because I am an honest Englishman, and will take no more than the law allows. For when the deed was done, this foul and base wretch fled to sanctuary at St. Cross, and I, as you may think, after him with all the posse. The prior, however, is so ordered that while he holds his cross no man may lay hand upon him without the ban of church, which heaven forfend from me or mine. Yet, if for an instant he lay the cross aside, or he fail to journey to Pitsteep, where it is ordered that he shall take ship to outland parts, or if he take not the first ship, or if until the ship be ready he walk not every day into the sea as far as his loins, then he becomes outlaw, and I shall forthwith dash out his brains." At this the man on the ground snarled up at him like a rat, while the other clenched his teeth, and shook his club, and looked down at him with murder in his eyes. Knight and squire gazed from rogue to avenger, but as it was a matter which none could mend, they tarried no longer, but rode upon their way. Alleyne, looking back, so that the murderer had drawn bread and cheese from his scrip, and was silently munching it, with a protecting cross still hugged to his breast, while the other, black and grim, stood in the sunlit road and threw his dark shadow athwart him. Chapter 15. How the Yellow Colt sailed forth from Leap. That night the company slept at St. Leonard's, in the great monastic bands in Spickham, ground well known both to Alleyne and to John, for they were almost within sight of the Abbey of Beaulieu. A strange thrill it gave to the young squire to see the well-remembered white dress once more, and to hear the myriad tolling of the deep vespers bell. At early dawn they passed across the broad, sluggish, reed-girt stream, men, horses, and baggage in the flat ferry barges, and so journeyed on through the fresh morning air past Exbury to Leap. Topping the heathy down, they came of a sudden full in sight of the old seaport, a cluster of houses, a trail of blue smoke, and a bristle of masts. To right and left the long blue curve of the Solent lapped in a fringe of foam upon the yellow beach. Some way out from the town a line of Pessiners, Crayers, and other small craft were rolling lazily on the gentle swell. Further out still lay a great merchant ship, high-ended, deep-waisted, painted of a canary yellow, and towering above the fishing boats like a swan among ducklings. By St. Paul, said the knight, our good merchant of Southampton hath not played us false, for methinks I can see our ship down yonder. He said that she would be of great size and of a yellow shade. By my hilt, yes, muttered Aylward. She is yellow as a kite's claw, and would carry as many men as there are pips in a pomegranate. It is as well, remarked Telek, for methinks, my fair lord, that we are not the only ones who are waiting a passage to Gascony. Mine eye catches at times a flash and sparkle among yonder houses which assuredly never came from shipman's jacket or the gabardine of a burgher. I can also see it, said Alleyne, shading his eyes with his hand, and I can see men-at-arms in yonder boats which ply betwixt the vessel and the shore. But methinks that we are very welcome here, for already they come forth to meet us. A tumultuous crowd of fishermen, citizens, and women had indeed swarmed out from a northern gate, and approached them up the side of the May, waving their hands and dancing with joy, as though a great fear had been rolled back from their minds. At their head rode a very large and solemn man, with a long chin and a drooping lip. He wore a fur tippet round his neck and a heavy gold chain over it, with a medallion which dangled in front of him. Since you ask me, said the man-at-arms, I would take it kindly if you could spare a link or two of the chain which hangs round your neck. The mayor of Leap gazed with amazement on the mild face and slender frame of the famous warrior. How? Cried Sir Nigel, pricking up his ears. Yes, my lord, for the town being very ancient and the walls as old as the town, it follows that they are very ancient too. But there is a certain villainous and bloodthirsty Norman pirate hight Tettenwell, who, with a Genoan called Tito Carixai, commonly known as Spadebeard, hath been a mighty scourge upon these coasts. Indeed, my lord, they are very cruel and black-hearted men, graceless and ruthless, and if they should come to the ancient and powerful town of Leap then good-bye to the ancient and powerful town of Leap, quoth Ford, whose lightness of tongue could at times rise above his or Sir Nigel. The knight, however, was too much intent upon the matter in hand to give heed to the flippancy of his squire. Have you then cause, he asked, to think that these men are about to venture an attempt upon you? We cannot tarry, said Sir Nigel, riding towards the town, with the mayor upon his left side. The prince awaits us at Bordeaux, and we may not be behind the general muster. Yet I will promise you that on our way we shall find time to pass Freshwater, and to prevail upon these rovers to leave you in peace. There is a very proper cog out yonder, said Sir Nigel. It would be a very strange thing if any ship were not a warship, when it had such men as these upon her decks. Certes, we shall do as I say, and that no later than this very day. My lord, said a rough-haired, dark-faced man, who walked by the knight's other stirrup, with his head sloped to catch all that he was saying. By your leave, I have no doubt that you are skilled in land fighting and the marshalling of lances, but, by my soul, you will find it another thing upon the sea. I am the master shipman of this yellow cog, and my name is Goodwin Hortain. I have sailed since I was as high as the staff, and I have fought against these Normans and against the Genos, as well as the Scotch, the Bretons, the Spanish, and the Moors. I tell you, sir, that my ship is over light and over frail for such work, and it will but end in our having our throats cut, or being sold as slaves to the Barbary heathen. I also have experienced one or two gentle and honourable ventures upon the sea, quoth Sir Nigel, and I am right blithe to have so fair a task before us. I think, good master shipman, that you and I may win great honour in this matter, and I can see very readily that you are a brave and stout man. How now, Sir Mayor, he roared, in a voice like a bull. How now, Sir Mayor, how are the clams and the scallops? My fair sir, you flatter me, cried the mayor. I am a peaceful trader, and I am not wont to be so shouted at upon so small a matter. Small, shrieked the other. Small, clams and scallops. Ask me to your table to partake of the dainty of the town, and when I come a barren welcome and a bare board. Where is my spear-bearer? Nay, Sir Oliver, cried Sir Nigel, laughing. Let your anger be appeased, since instead of this dish you come upon an old friend and comrade. By Saint Martin of Tours, shouted the fat knight, his wrath will change in an instant to joy, if it is not my dear little game rooster of the Garonne. Ah, my sweet coz, I am right glad to see you. What days we have seen together. Nay, I cannot call to mind that we ever so much as drew sword at the place. Man, cried Sir Oliver, your mind still runs on naught but blades and bassinets. Us no space in thy frame for the softer joys. Ah, even now I can scarce speak of it unmoved. So noble a pie, such tender pigeons, and sugar in the gravy instead of salt. You were by my side that day, as were Sir Claude Lothaire and the Lord of Pummers. I remember it, said Sir Nigel, laughing, and how you harried the cook down the street and spoke of setting fire to the inn. By St. Paul, most worthy mayor, my old friend is a perilous man, and I rede you that you compose your difference with him on such terms as you may. The clams and scallops shall be ready within the hour, the mayor answered. I had asked Sir Oliver Butterthorne to do my humble board the honour to partake, and it of the dainty upon which we take some little pride. But in sooth this alarm of pirates hath cast such a shadow on my wits that I am like one distray. But I trust, Sir Nigel, that you will also partake of none meat with me. 3 and 40. The 40 are drunk, and the 3 are but indifferent sober. I have them all safe upon the ship. They had best find their wits again, for I shall have work for every man of them ere the sun set. It is my intention, if it seems good to you, to try a venture against these Norman and Genos rovers. They carry caviar and certain very noble spices from the Levant aboard of ships from Genoa, quoth Sir Oliver. We may come to great profit through the business. I pray you, master shipman, that when you go on board you pour a helmetful of sea-water over any of my rogues whom you may see there. Leaving the lusty knight and the mayor of Leap, Sir Nigel led the company straight down to the water's edge, where long lines of flat lighters swiftly bore them to their vessel. Horse after horse was slung by main force up from the barges, and after kicking and plunging in empty air was dropped into the deep waist of the yellow cog, where rows of stalls stood ready for their safekeeping. Englishmen in those days were skilled and prompt in such matters, for it was so not long before that Edward had embarked as many as 50,000 men in the port of Orwell, with their horses and their baggage, all in the space of 24 hours. So urgent was Sir Nigel on the shore, and so prompt was Goodwin Hortain on the cog, that Sir Oliver Butethorne had scarce swallowed his last scallop ere the peal of the trumpet and clang of nakes announced that all was ready and the anchor drawn. In the last boat which left the shore the 2 commanders sat together in the sheets, a strange contrast of one another, while under the feet of the rowers was a litter of huge stones which Sir Nigel had ordered to be carried to the cog. These once aboard, the ship set her broad mainsail, purple in colour, and with a golden streaked Christopher bearing Christ upon his shoulder in the centre of it. The breeze blew, the sail bellied, overheeled the portly vessel, and away she plunged through the smooth blue rollers, amid the clang of the minstrels on her poop and the shouting of the black crowd who fringed the yellow beach. To the left lay the green island of Wight, with its long, low, curving hills peeping over each other's shoulders to the skyline. To the right, the wooded Hampshire coast as far as I could reach, above a steel-blue heaven, with a wintry sun shimmering down upon them, and enough of frost to set the breath a-smoking. By St. Paul, said Sir Nigel gaily, as he stood upon the poop and looked on either side of him, it is a land which is very well worth fighting for, and it were pity to go to France for what may be had at home. Did you not spy a crooked man upon the beach? Nay, I spied nothing, grumbled Sir Oliver, for I was hurried down with a clam stuck in my gizzard and an untasted goblet of Cyprus on the board behind me. I saw him, my fair lord, said Turlake, an old man with one shoulder higher than the other. I cannot tell, my fair lord. The Romans of old were a very wise people. Yet, certes, they placed their faith in such matters. So, too, did the Greeks and divers other ancient peoples who were famed for their learning. Yet of the moderns there are many who scoff at all omens. There can be no manner of doubt about it, said Sir Oliver Butterthorne. I can well remember that in Navarre one day it thundered on the left out of a cloudless sky. We knew that ill would come of it, nor had we long to wait. Only 13 days after, a haunch of prime venison was carried from my very tent door by the wolves, and on the same day 2 flasks of old vernage turned sour and muddy. You may bring my harness from below, said Sir Nigel to his squires, and also, I pray you, bring up Sir Oliver's, and we shall don it here. You may then see to your own gear, for this day you will, I hope, make a very honourable entrance into the field of chivalry, and prove yourselves to be very worthy and valiant squires. And now, Sir Oliver, as to our dispositions, would it please you that I should order them, or will you? You, my cockerel, you, by Our Lady, I am no chicken, but I cannot claim to know as much of war as the squire of Sir Walter Manny. Settle the matter to your own liking. You shall fly your pennon upon the forepart, then, and I upon the poop. For foreguard I shall give you your own 40 men, with 20 archers. 20 men, with my own men-at-arms and squires, will serve as a poop guard. 10 archers, with 30 shipmen, under the master, may hold the waist, while 10 lie aloft with stones and arbalists. How like you that? Good. By my faith, good. But here comes my harness, and I must work, for I cannot slip into it as I was wont when first I set my face to the wars. Meanwhile there had been bustle and preparation in all parts of the great vessel. The archers stood in groups about the decks, new-stringing their bows, and testing that they were firm at the nocks. Among them moved Aylward and other of the older soldiers, with a few whispered words of precept here and of warning there. Stand to it, my hearts of gold, said the old bowman as he passed from knot to knot. By my hilt, we are in luck this journey. Bear in mind the old saying of the company. What is that, Aylward? Cried several, leaning on their bows and laughing at him. It would not be amiss, said Hordle John, if under his girdle he had 4 farthings worth of wine. Work first, wine afterwards, mon camarade. But it is time that we took our order, for methinks that between the Needle Rocks and the Elm Cliffs yonder, I can catch a glimpse of the topmasts of the galleys. Hewitt, Cook, Johnson, Cunningham, your men are of the poop guard. Thornbury, Walters, Hackett, Battlesmen, you are with Sir Oliver on the forecastle. Simon, you bide with your lord's banner, but 10 men must go forward. Quietly and promptly the men took their places, lying flat upon their faces on the deck, for such was Sir Nigel's order. Near the prow was planted Sir Oliver's spear, with his arms, a boar's head gules upon a field of gold. Close by the stern stood Black Simon with the pennon of the House of Loring. In the waist gathered the Southampton mariners, hairy and burly men, with their jerkins thrown off, their waists braced tight, swords, mallets, and poleaxes in their hands. Their leader, Goodwin Hortane, stood upon the poop and talked with Sir Nigel, casting his eye up sometimes at the swelling sail, and then glancing back at the 2 seamen who held the tiller. Pass the word, said Sir Nigel, that no man shall stand to arms or draw his bowstring until my trumpeter shall sound. It would be well that we should seem to be a merchant ship from Southampton and appear to flee from them. I would I had your eyes, said Sir Nigel, blinking at the pirate galleys. They seem very gallant ships, and I trust that we shall have much pleasance from our meeting with them. It will be well to pass the word, that we should neither give nor take quarter this day. Have you perchance a priest or friar aboard this ship, Master Hortane? No, my fair lord. The yellow cog had now shot out from the narrow waters of the Solent, and was plunging and rolling on the long heave of the open channel. The wind blew freshly from the east, with a very keen edge to it, and the great sail bellied roundly out, laying the vessel over until the water hissed beneath her lee bulwarks. Broad and ungainly, she floundered from wave to wave, dipping her round bows deeply into the blue rollers, and sending the white flakes of foam in a spatter over her decks. On her larboard quarter lay the 2 dark galleys, which had already hoisted sail, and was shooting out from Freshwater Bay in swift pursuit, their double line of oars giving them a vantage which could not fail to bring them up with any vessel which trusted to sails alone. High and bluff the English cog, long, black, and swift the pirate galleys, like 2 fierce lean wolves which has seen a lordly and unsuspecting stag walk past their forest lay. Shall we turn, my fair lord, or shall we carry on? asked the master shipman, looking behind him with anxious eyes. Nay, we must carry on and play the part of the helpless merchant. That on the right, said Edricson, appears to have the head of an Ethiop upon it. At each end of the yard there did indeed hang the dark figure of a man, jolting and lurching with hideous jerkings of its limbs at every plunge and swoop of the galley. By St. Paul, said Sir Nigel, and by the help of St. George and Our Lady, it will be a very strange thing if our black-headed friend does not himself swing thence ere he be many hours older. But what is that upon the other galley? Let them be supplied with all that is heavy and weighty in the ship, said Sir Nigel. Then we must send them up Sir Oliver Butterstone, quoth Ford. Aylward, cried the knight, pick your 3 trustiest archers, and see if you cannot do something to hinder their aim. Methinks they are within long arrow flight. The 3 archers named stood at the further end of the poop, balancing themselves with feet widely spread and bows drawn, until the heads of the cloth-yard arrows were level with the centre of the stave. You are the surer, Watkin, said Aylward, standing by them with shaft upon string. Do you take the rogue with the red COIF. You 2 bring down the man with the headpiece, and I will hold myself ready if you miss. Mau FOI, they are about to lose her. Shoot, Ms. Garcons, or you will be too late. The throng of pirates had cleared away from the great wooden catapult, leaving 2 of their number to discharge it. One in a scarlet cap bent over it, steadying the jagged rock which was balanced on the spoon-shaped end of the long wooden lever. The other held the loop of the rope, which would release the catch and send the unwieldy missile hurtling through the air. So for an instant they stood, showing hard and clear against the white sail behind them. The next, Redcap had fallen across a stone with an arrow between his ribs, and the other, struck in the leg and in the throat, was writhing and spluttering upon the ground. Lie low, Mizan founds, cried Aylward, motioning with his left hand. They will learn wisdom. They are bringing forward shield and mantlet. We shall have some pebbles about our ears ere long. What was that? He asked, as a hissing, sharp-drawn voice seemed to whisper in his ear. The steersman smiled, and pointed with his foot to where a short, heavy crossbow quarrel stuck quivering in the boards. At the same instant the man stumbled forward upon his knees, and lay lifeless upon the deck, a blood-stained feather jutting out from his back, as Alleyne stooped to raise him. The air seemed to be alive with the sharp zip-zip of the bolts, and he could hear them pattering on the deck like apples at a tree shaking. Raise 2 more mantlets by the poop lantern, said Sir Nigel quietly, and another man to the tiller, cried the master shipman. Keep them in play, Aylward, with 10 of your men, the knight continued, and let 10 of Sir Oliver's bowmen do as much for the Genos. I have no mind as yet to show them how much they have to fear from us. 10 picked shots under Aylward stood in line across the broad deck, and it was a lesson to the young squires who had seen nothing of war to note how orderly and how cool were these old soldiers, how quick to command, and how prompt to carrying out, 10 moving like one. Their comrades crouched beneath the bulwarks, with many a rough jest and many a scrap of criticism or advice. Higher, what? Higher. Put thy body into it. Forget not the wind. How? So ran the muttered chorus, while high above it rose the sharp twanging of the strings, the hiss of the shafts, and the short, draw your arrow, nick your arrow, shoot wholly together from the master bowman. And now both mangonels were at work from the galleys, but so covered and protected that, save at the moment of discharge, no glimpse could be caught of them. A huge brown rock from the Genos sang over their heads, and plunged sullenly into the slope of a wave. Another from the Norman whizzed into the waist, broke the back of a horse, and crashed its way through the side of the vessel. 2 others, flying together, tore a great gap in the St. Christopher upon the sail, and brushed 3 of Sir Oliver's men-at-arms from the forecastle. The master shipman looked at the knight with a troubled face. They keep their distance from us, said he. Our archery is over good, and they will not close. What defense can we make against the stones? I think I may trick them, the knight answered cheerfully, and passed his order to the archers. Instantly 5 of them threw up their hands, and fell prostrate upon the deck. One had already been slain by a bolt, so that there were but 4 upon their feet. That should give them hout, said Sir Nigel, eyeing the galleys, which crept along on either side, with a slow, measured swing of their great oars, the water swirling and foaming under their sharp stems. They still hold aloof, cried Hortain. Then down with 2 more, shouted their leader. That will do. Mauve I. But they come to our lure like chicks to the fowler. To your arms, men, the pennon behind me, and the squires round the pennon. Stand fast with the anchors in the waist, and be ready for a cast. Now blow out the trumpets, and may God's benison be with the honest man. As he spoke, a roar of voices and a roll of drums came from either galley, and the water was lashed into spray by the hurried beat of 100 oars. Down they swooped, one on the right, one on the left, the sides and shrouds black with men and bristling with weapons. In heavy clusters they hung upon the forecastle all ready for a spring, faces white, faces brown, faces yellow, and faces black, fair Norsemen, swarthy Italians, fierce rovers from the Levant, and fiery Moors from the Barbary states, of all hues and countries, and marked solely by the common stamp of a wild beast ferocity. Rasping up on either side, with oars trailing to save them from snapping, they poured in a living torrent with horrid yell and shrill whoop upon the defenseless merchantman. But wilder yet was the cry, and shriller still the scream, when there rose up from the shadow of those silent bulwarks the long lines of the English bowmen, and the arrows whizzed in a deadly sleet among the unprepared masses upon the pirate decks. From the higher sides of the cog the bowmen could shoot straight down, at a range which was so short as to enable a cloth-yard shaft to pierce through mail-coats or to transfix a shield, though it were an inch thick of toughened wood. One moment Alleyne saw the galley's poop crowded with rushing figures, waving arms, exultant faces. The next it was a blood-smeared shambles, with bodies piled 3 deep upon each other, the living cowering behind the dead to shelter themselves from that sudden storm blast of death. On either side the seamen whom Sir Nigel had chosen for the purpose had cast their anchors over the side of the galleys, so that the 3 vessels, locked in an iron grip, lurched heavily forward upon the swell, and now set in a fell and fierce fight, one of 1,000 of which no chronicler has spoken and no poet sung. Through all the centuries and over all those southern waters nameless men have fought in nameless places, their sole monuments a protected coast and an unravaged countryside. Fore and aft the archers had cleared the galley's decks, but from either side the rovers had poured down into the waist, where the seamen and bowmen were pushed back, and so mingled with their foes that it was impossible for their comrades above to draw a string to help them. It was a wild chaos where axe and sword rose and fell, while Englishmen, Norman, and Italian staggered and reeled on a deck which was cumbered with bodies and slippery with blood. The clang of blows, the cries of the stricken, the short, deep shout of the islanders, and the fierce whoops of the rovers rose together in a deafening tumult, while the breath of the panting men went up in the wintry air like the smoke from furnace. The giant Tettenwau, towering above his fellows and clad from head to foot in plate of proof, led on his borders, waving a huge mace in the air, with which he struck to the deck every man who approached him. On the other side, Spadebeard, a dwarf in height, but of great breadth of shoulder and length of arm, had cut a road almost to the mast, with 80 Genos men-at-arms close at his heels. Between these 2 formidable assailants the seamen were being slowly wedged more closely together, until they stood back to back under the mast with the rovers raging upon every side of them. But help was close at hand. Sir Oliver Butterstone with his men-at-arms had swarmed down from the forecastle, while Sir Nigel, with his 3 squires, Black Simon, Aylward, Hordle-John, and a score more, threw themselves from the poop and hurled themselves into the thickest of the fight. Alleyne, as in duty bound, kept his eyes fixed ever on his lord and pressed forward close at his heels. Often had he heard of Sir Nigel's prowess and skill with all knightly weapons, but all the tales that had reached his ears fell far short of the real quickness and coolness of the man. It was as if the devil was in him, for he sprang here and sprang there, now thrusting and now cutting, catching blows on his shield, turning them with his blade, stooping under the swing of an axe, springing over the sweep of a sword, so swift and so erratic that the man who braced himself for a blow at him might find him 6 paces off ere he could bring it down. 3 pirates had fallen before him, and he had wounded Spadebeard in the neck, when the Norman giant sprang at him from the side with a slashing blow from his deadly mace. Sir Nigel stooped to avoid it, and at the same instant turned a thrust from the Genoese swordsman. But, his foot slipping in a pool of blood, he fell heavily to the ground. Alleyne sprang in front of the Norman, but his sword was shattered and he himself beaten to the ground by a second blow from the ponderous weapon. Ere the pirate chief could repeat it, however, John's iron grip fell upon his wrist, and he found that for once he was in the hands of a stronger man than himself. Fiercely he strove to disengage his weapon, but Hordle John bent his arm slowly back until, with a sharp crack, like a breaking stave, it turned limp in his grasp, and the mace dropped from the nerveless fingers. In vain he tried to pluck it up with the other hand. Back and back still his foeman bent him, until, with a roar of pain and of fury, the giant clanged his full length upon the boards, while the glimmer of a knife before the bars of his helmet warned him that Short would be his shrift if he moved. Cowed and disheartened by the loss of their leader, the Normans had given back and were now streaming over the bulwarks onto their own galley, dropping a dozen at a time onto her deck. But the anchor still held them in its crooked claw, and Sir Oliver with 50 men was hard upon their heels. Now, too, the archers had room to draw their bows once more, and great stones from the yard of the cog came thundering and crashing among the flying rovers. Here and there they rushed with wild screams and curses, diving under the sail, crouching behind booms, huddling into corners like rabbits when the ferret are upon them, as helpless and as hopeless. They were stern days, and if the honest soldier, too poor for a ransom, had no prospect of mercy upon the battlefield, what ruth was there for sea robbers, the enemies of humankind, taken in the very deed, with proofs of their crimes still swinging upon their yardarm? But the fight had taken a new and a strange turn upon the other side. Spadebeard and his men had given slowly back, hard pressed by Sir Nigel, Aylward, Black Simon, and the poop gowd. Foot by foot the Italian had retreated, his armor running blood at every joint, his shield split, his crest shorn, his voice fallen away to a mere gasping and croaking. Yet he faced his foeman with dauntless courage, dashing in, springing back, sure-footed, steady-handed, with a point which seemed to menace 3 at once. Beaten back onto the deck of his own vessel, and closely followed by a dozen Englishmen, he disengaged himself from them, ran swiftly down the deck, sprang back into the cog once more, cut the rope which held the anchor, and was back in an instant among his crossbowmen. At the same time the Genoese sailors thrust with their oars against the side of the cog, and a rapidly widening rift appeared between the two vessels. "By St. George," cried Ford, "we are cut off from Sir Nigel." "He is lost," gasped Turlake. "Come, let us spring for it." The two youths jumped with all their strength to reach the departing galley. Ford's feet reached the edge of the bulwarks, and his hand clutching a rope he swung himself on board. Turlake fell short, crashing among the oars, and bounded off into the sea. Alleyne, staggering to the side, was about to hurl himself after him, but Hordle John dragged him back by the girdle. "You can scarce stand, lad, far less jump," said he. "See how the blood rips from your bassinet." "My place is by the flag," cried Alleyne, vainly struggling to break from the other's hold. The vessels were indeed so far apart now that the Genoese could use a full sweep of their oars and draw away rapidly from the cog. "By heaven, Sir Nigel is down," cried the squire. The death of the Genoese leader did indeed bring the resistance to an end. Amid a thunder of cheering from cog and from galleys, the forked pennon fluttered upon the forecastle, and the galley, sweeping round, came slowly back, as the slaves who rowed it learned the wishes of their new masters. "He will come to anon," said the knight, stooping over him and passing his fingers through his hair. "I have lost one very valiant and gentle squire this day. I can ill afford to lose another. How many men have fallen? And of the others, they are all dead, save only the Norman knight who stands behind you. What would you that we should do with him?" "Peasants, base roturiers," cried the other, "it is a fitting death. Mais le seigneur d'Andelys, avec le sang des rois dans ses veins. C'est incroyable." Sir Nigel turned upon his heel, while 2 seamen cast a noose over the pirate's neck. At the touch of the cord he snapped the bonds which bound him, dashed one of the archers to the deck, and seizing the other round the waist, sprang with him into the sea. "By my hilt, he is gone!" cried Aylward, rushing to the side. "They have sunk together like a stone." "I am right glad of it," answered Sir Nigel, "for though it was against my vow to lose him, I deem that he has carried himself like a very gentle and debonair cavalier." Chapter 17. How the Yellow Cog crossed the bar of Gironde. For 2 days the Yellow Cog ran swiftly before a northeasterly wind, and on the dawn of the third the high land of Ushant lay like a mist upon the shimmering skyline. There came a plump of rain towards midday, and the breeze died down, but it freshened again before nightfall, and Goodwin Hawtayne veered his sheet and held head for the south. Next morning they had passed Belle Isle, and ran through the midst of a fleet of transports returning from Guienne. Sir Nigel Loring and Sir Oliver Butterstone at once hung their shields over the side, and displayed their pennons as was accustomed, noting with the keenest interest the answering symbols which told the names of the cavaliers who had been constrained by ill health or wounds to leave the prince at so critical a time. That evening a great dun-coloured cloud banked up in the west, and an anxious man was Goodwin Hawtayne, for a third part of his crew had been slain, and half the remainder were aboard the galleys, so that, with an injured ship, he was little fit to meet such a storm as sweeps over those waters. All night it blew in short fitful puffs, heeling the great cog over until the water curled over her lee bulwarks. As the wind still freshened, the yard was lowered halfway down the mast in the morning. Alleyne, wretchedly ill and weak, with his head still ringing from the blow which he had received, crawled up upon deck. Water swept in aslant. It was preferable to the noisome, rat-haunted dungeons which served as cabins. His thoughts were still in the woods of Minstead and the old armory of Twynham Castle, when the hoarse voice of the master shipman brought them back once more to the Bay of Biscay. "By my troth, young sir," he said, "you are as long in the face as the devil at a christening, and I cannot marvel at it, for I have sailed these waters since I was as high as this Wynyard, and yet I never saw more sure promise of an evil night." "Nay, I had other things upon my mind," the squire answered. "And so has every man," cried Hawtayne in an injured voice. "Let the shipman see to it. It is the master shipman's affair. Put it all upon good Master Hawtayne. Never had I so much care since first I blew trumpet, and showed cartel at the west gate of Southampton." "What is amiss, then?" asked Alleyne, for the man's words were as gusty as the weather. "Amiss, quotha? Here am I with but half my mariners, and a hole in the ship where that 20 devil stones struck us big enough to fit the fat widow of Northam through. It is well enough on this tack, but I would have you tell me what I am to do on the other. We are like to have salt water upon us until we be found pickled like the herrings in an Easterling's barrels. What says Sir Nigel to it?" "He is below pricking out the coat armour of his mother's uncle. Pester me not with such small matters," was all that I could get from him. Then there is Sir Oliver. "Fry them in oil with a dressing of Gascony," quoth he, and then swore at me because I had not been the cook. Wallawa, thought I, mad master, sober man, so away forward to the archers. Harrow and alas, but they were worse than the others. Would they not help you then? Nay, they set tway and tway at a board, him that they call Aylward, and the great red-headed man who snapped the Norman's arm bone, and the black man from Norwich, and a score of others, rattling their dice in an archer's gauntlet for one of the box. The ship can scarce last much longer, my masters. Quoth I, that is your business. Old swine's head, cried the black galliard. Le diable t'importe, says Aylward. A5, a 4, and the main, shouted the big man, with a voice like the flap of a sail. Hark to them now, young sir, and say if I speak not sooth. As he spoke, there sounded high above the shriek of the gale and the straining of the timbers a gust of oaths with a roar of deep-chested mirth from the gamblers in the forecastle. Nay, nay, your head I can see is still toddy, and I faith little head would you have, had your bassinet not stood your friend. All that may be done is already carried out, for we have stuffed the gate with sails and corded it without and within. Yet when we bail our bowline and veer the sheet our lives will hang upon the breach remaining blocked. See how yonder headland looms upon us through the mist. We must tack within 3 arrow flights, or we may find a rock through our timbers. Now, Saint Christopher be praised. Here is Sir Nigel, with whom I may confer. I pry thee that you will pardon me, said the knight, clutching his way along the bulwark. "I would not show lack of courtesy toward a worthy man, but I was deep in a matter of some weight, concerning which, Alleyne, I should be glad of your rede. It touches the question of demediation or impalement in the code of mine uncle, Sir John Leighton of Shropshire, who took under wife the widow of Sir Henry Oglander of Nunwell. The case has been much debated by pursuivants and kings of arms. But how is it with you, master shipman?" "Go call Sir Oliver," said Sir Nigel, and presently the portly knight made his way all a-straddle down the slippery deck. "By my soul, master shipman, this passes all patience," he cried roughly. "If this ship of yours must needs dance and skip like a clown at a kermesse, then I pray you that you will put me into one of these galeases. I had but set down to a flask of Malvoisie and a mortress of brawn, as is my use about this hour, when there comes a share-king, and I find my wine over my legs and the flask in my lap, and then as I stoop to clip it there comes another cursed shirk, and there's a mortress of brawn stuck fast to the nape of my neck. At this moment I have 2 pages coursing after it from side to side, like hounds behind a leveret. Never did living pig gamble more lightly. But you have sent for me, Sir Nigel. I would fain have your rede, Sir Oliver, for Master Hautayne fears that when we veer there may come danger from the hole in our side." "Then do not veer," quoth Sir Oliver hastily. "And now, fair sir, I must hasten back to see how my rogues have fared with the brawn." "Nay, but this will scarce suffice," cried the shipman. "If we do not veer, we will be upon the rocks within the hour." "Then veer," said Sir Oliver. "There's my rede. And now, Sir Nigel, I must crave." At this instant, however, a startled shout rang out from 2 seamen upon the forecastle. "Rocks!" they yelled, stabbing into the air with their forefingers. "Rocks beneath our very bows." Through the belly of a great black wave, not 100 paces to the front of them, there thrust forth a huge jagged mess of brown stone, which spouted spray as though it was some crouching monster, while a dull menacing boom and roar filled the air. "Yea, yea," screamed Goodwin Hautayne, fleeing himself upon the long pole which served as a tiller. "Cut the halyard, haul her over, lay her 2 courses to the wind." Over swung the great boom, and the cog trembled and quivered within 5 spear lengths of the breakers. "She can scarce draw clear," cried Hautayne, with his eye from the sail to the seething line of foam. "May the holy Julian stand by us, and the thrice-sainted Christopher." "If there be such peril, Sir Oliver," quoth Sir Nigel, "it would be very knightly and fitting that we should show our pennons. I pray you, Edricson, that you will command my guide and bearer to put forward my banner." "And sound the trumpets," cried Sir Oliver. "In manus tuas, to mine. I am in the keeping of James of Compostella, to whose shrine I shall make pilgrimage, and in whose honour I vow that I will eat a carp each year upon his feast day. Mondayu, but the waves roar. How is it with us now, master shipman?" We draw," cried Hautayne, with his eyes still fixed upon the foam which is under the very bulge of the side. "Ah, Holy Mother, be with us now." As he spoke, the cog rasped along the edge of the reef, and a long white curling sheet of wood was planed off from her side from waist to poop by a jutting horn of the rock. At the same instant she lay suddenly over, the sail drew full, and she plunged seawards amid the shoutings of the seamen and the archers. "The Virgin be praised," cried the shipman, wiping his brow. "For this shall bell swing and candle burn when I see Southampton water once more. Cheerily, my hearts, pull yelly on the bowline." "By my soul, I would rather have a dry death," quoth Sir Oliver. "Oh, mort die you! I have eaten so many fish that it were but justice that the fish should eat me. Now I must back to the cabin, for I have matters there which crave my attention." "Nay, Sir Oliver, you had best bide with us, and still show your ensign," Sir Nigel answered. "For, if I understand the matter right, we are but turned from one danger to the other." "Good Master Hautayne," cried the boatswain, rushing aft, "the water comes in upon us apace. The waves have driven in the sail, wherewith we strove to stop the whole." As he spoke, the seamen came swarming onto the poop and the forecastle to avoid the torrent which poured through the huge leak into the waist. High above the roar of the wind and the clash of the sea rose the shrill half-human cries of the horses, as they found the water rising rapidly around them. "Stop it from without!" cried Hautaine, seizing the end of the wet sail with which the gap had been plugged. "Speedily, my hearts, or we are gone!" Swiftly they rove ropes to the corners, and then, rushing forward to bows, they lowered them under the keel and drew them tight in such a way that the sail should cover the outer face of the gap. The force of the rush of water was checked by this obstacle, but it still squirted plentifully from every side of it. At the sides the horses were above the belly, and in the center a man from the poop could scarce touch the deck with a 7-foot spear. The cog lay low in the water, and the waves splashed freely over the weather bulwark. "I fear that we can scarce bide upon this tack," cried Hautaine, "and yet the other will drive us on the rocks." "Might we not hold down sail and wait for better times?" suggested Sir Nigel. "Nay, we should drift upon the rocks. 30 years have I been on the sea, and never yet in greater straits. Yet we are in the hands of the saints." "Of whom," cried Sir Oliver, "I look more particularly to St. James of Compostella, who hath already befriended us this day, and on whose feast I hereby vow that I shall eat a second carp, if he will but interpose a second time." The wreck had thickened to seaward, and the coast was but a blurred line. 2 vague shadows in the offing showed where the galeases rolled and tossed upon the great Atlantic rollers. Hautaine looked wistfully in their direction. "If they would but lie closer, we might find safety, even should the cog founder. You will bear me out with good Master Witherton of Southampton that I have done all that a shipman might. It would be well that you should doff mail and greaves, Sir Nigel, for, by the Black Rood, it is like enough that we shall have to swim for it." "Nay," said the little knight, "it would be scarce fitting that a cavalier should throw off his harness to the feel of every puff of wind and puddle of water. I would rather that my company should gather round me here on the poop, where we might abide together whatever God may be pleased to send. But, certes, Master Hautaine, for all that my sight is none of the best, it is not the first time that I have seen that headland upon the left." The seaman shaded his eyes with his hand, and gazed earnestly through the haze and spray. Suddenly he threw up his arms and shouted aloud in his joy. "'Tis the point of La Tremblade," he cried. "I had not thought that we were as far as Oleron. The Gironde lies before us, and once over the bar, and under shelter of the Tour de Cordouen, all will be well with us. Veer again, my hearts, and bring her to try with the main course." The sail swung round once more, and the cog, battered and torn and well-nigh waterlogged, staggered in for this haven of refuge. A bluff cape to the north and a long spit to the south marked the mouth of the noble river, with a low-lying island of silted sand in the center, all shrouded and curtained by the spume of the breakers. A line of broken water traced the dangerous bow, which in clear day and balmy weather has cracked the back of many a tall ship. "There is a channel," said Hautaine, "which was shown to me by the prince's own pilot. Mark yonder tree upon the bank, and see the tower which rises behind it. If these two be held in a line, even as we hold them now, it may be done, though our ship draws 2 good ells more than when she put forth." "God speed you, Master Hautaine," cried Sir Oliver. "Twice have we come scathless out of peril, and now for the 3rd time I commend me to the blessed James of Compostella, to whom I vow." "Nay, nay, old friend," whispered Sir Nigel, "you are like to bring a judgment upon us with these vows, which no living man could accomplish. Have I not already heard you vow to eat 2 carp in one day, and now you would venture upon a 3rd? I pray you that you will order the company to lie down," cried Hautaine, who had taken the tiller and was gazing ahead with a fixed eye. "In 3 minutes we shall either be lost or in safety." Archers and seamen lay flat upon the deck, waiting in stolid silence for whatever fate might come. Hautaine bent his weight upon the tiller, and crouched to see under the bellying sail. Sir Oliver and Sir Nigel stood erect with hands crossed in front of the poop. Down swooped the great cog into the narrow channel, which was the portal to safety. On either bow roared the shallow bow. Right ahead, one small lane of black swirling water marked the pilot's course. But true was the eye and firm the hand which guided. A dull scraping came from beneath. The vessel quivered and shook, at the waist, at the quarter, and behind sounded the grim roaring of the waters, and with a plunge the yellow cog was over the bar and speeding swiftly up the broad and tranquil estuary of the Gironde. Chapter 18. How Sir Nigel put a patch upon his eye. It was on the morning of Friday, the 28th day of November, 2 days before the feast of St. Andrew, that the cog and her 2 prisoners, after a weary tacking up the Gironde and the Garonne, dropped anchor at last in front of the noble city of Bordeaux. With wonder and admiration, Alleyne, leaning over the bulwarks, gazed at the forest of Masse, the swarm of boats darting hither and thither on the bosom of the broad curving stream, and the grey crescent-shaped city which stretched with many a tower and minaret along the western shore. Never had he in his quiet life seen so great a town, nor was there in the whole of England, save London alone, one which might match it in size or in wealth. Here came the merchandise of all the fair countries which are watered by the Garonne and the Dordogne, the cloths of the south, the skins of Guyenne, the wines of the Medoc, to be borne away to Hull, Exeter, Dartmouth, Bristol, or Chester, in exchange for the wools and woolfells of England. Here, too, dwelt those famous smelters and welders who had made the Bordeaux steel the most trusty upon earth, and could give a temper to lance or to sword which might mean dear life to its owner. Alleyne could see the smoke of their forges reeking up in the clear morning air. The storm had died down now to a gentle breeze, which wafted to his ears the long-drawn, stirring bugle calls which sounded from the ancient ramparts. "Hola, mon petit," said Aylward, coming up to where he stood. "Thou art a squire now, and like enough to win the golden spurs, while I am still the master bowman, and master bowman I shall bide. I dare scarce wag my tongue so freely with you as when we tramped together past Wilverley Chase, else I might be your guide now, for indeed I know every house in Bordeaux as a friar knows the beads on his rosary." "Nay, Aylward," said Alleyne, laying his hand upon the sleeve of his companion's frayed jerkin, "you cannot think me so thrall as to throw aside an old friend because I have had some small share of good fortune. I take it unkind that you should have thought such evil of me. Nay, mon gars, 'twas but a flight shot to see if the wind blew steady, though I were a rogue to doubt it. Why, had I not met you, Aylward, at the Lyndhurst Inn, who can say where I had now been? Certes, I had not gone to Twynham Castle, nor become squire to Sir Nigel, nor met." He paused abruptly and flushed to his hair, but the bowman was too busy with his own thoughts to notice his young companion's embarrassment. "It was a good hostel, that of the Pied Merlin," he remarked, "by my 10 finger bones. When I hang bow on nail and change my brigandine for a tunic, I might do worse than take over the dame and her business." "I thought," said Alleyne, "that you were betrothed to some one at Christchurch." "To 3, Aylward answered moodily, "to 3. I fear I may not go back to Christchurch. I might chance to see hotter service in Hampshire than I have ever done in Gascony. But mark you now yonder lofty turret in the centre, which stands back from the river and of the broad banner upon the summit. See, the rising sun flashes full upon it, and sparkles on the golden lions. 'Tis the royal banner of England, crossed by the prince's label. There he dwells in the abbey of St. Andrew, where he hath kept his court these years back. Beside it is the minster of the same saint, who is the town under his very special care. And how of yon grey turret on the left? 'Tis the fane of St. Michael, as that upon the right is of St. Remy. They, too, above the poop of yonder nave, you see the towers of St. Croix and of Pays Berland. Mark also the mighty ramparts which are pierced by the 3 water gates, and 16 others to the landward side. And how is it, good Aylward, that there comes so much music from the town? I seem to hear 100 trumpets, all calling in chorus. It would be strange else, seeing that all the great lords of England and of Gascony are within the walls, and each would have his trumpeter blow as loud as his neighbour, lest it might be thought that his dignity had been abated. Mowif o I, they make as much louster as a Scotch army, where every man fills himself with girdle cakes, and sits up all night to blow upon the tootle pipe. See all along the banks how the pages water the horses, and there beyond the town how they gallop them over the plain. For every horse you see a belted knight of herbergage in the town. For, as I learn, the men-at-arms and archers have already gone forward to Dax. I trust, Aylward, said Sir Nigel, coming upon deck, that the men are ready for the land. Go tell them that the boats will be for them within the hour. The archer raised his hand in salute and hastened forward. In the meantime, Sir Oliver had followed his brother knight, and the two paced the poop together, Sir Nigel in his plum-coloured velvet suit with flat cap of the same, adorned in front with a lady loins glove and girt round with a curling ostrich feather. The lusty knight, on the other hand, was clad in the very latest mode, with coat hattie, doublet, pourpoint, court pie, and poltock of olive green, picked out with pink and jagged at the edges. A red chaperon or cap, with long hanging cannet, sat daintily on the back of his black curled head, while his gold-hued shoes were twisted up a la Polaine, as though the toes were shooting forth a tendril which might hope in time to entwine itself around his massive leg. "Once more, Sir Oliver," said Sir Nigel, looking shoreward with sparkling eyes, "do we find ourselves at the gate of honour, the door which has so often led us to all that is knightly and worthy. There flies the prince's banner, and it would be well that we haste ashore and pay our obeisance to him. The boats already swarm from the bank. There is a goodly hostel near the west gate, which is famed for the stewing of spiced pullets," remarked Sir Oliver. "We might take the edge of our hunger off ere we seek the prince, for though his tables are gay with damask and silver, he is no trencherman himself, and hath no sympathy for those who are his betters." "His betters?" "His betters before the tranquire, lad. Sniff not treason where none is meant. I have seen him smile in his quiet way because I had looked for the fourth time towards the carving squire. And indeed to watch him dallying with a little gobbet of bread, or sipping his cup of thrice-watered wine, is enough to make a man feel shame at his own hunger. Yet war and glory, my good friend, though well enough in their way, will not serve to tighten such a belt as clasps my waist." "How read you that coat which hangs over yonder galley, Alleyne?" asked Sir Nigel. "Argent, a ben vert between coatizers dansecules. It is a northern coat. I have seen it in the train of the Percies. From the Shields, there is not one of these vessels which is not knight or baron aboard. I would mine eyes were better. How read you this upon the left? Argent and azure, a berry wavy of 6. Ha! It is a sign of the Wiltshire Stordens. And there beyond I see the red and silver of the Worsleys of Apuldercombe, who like myself are of Hampshire lineage. Close behind us is the Moline cross of the gallant William Molyneux, and beside it the bloody chevrons of the Norfolk Woodhouses, with the emulets of the Musgraves of Westmoreland. By St. Paul, it would be a very strange thing if so noble a company were to gather without some notable deed of arms arising from it. And here is our boat, Sir Oliver, so it seems best to me that we should go to the Abbey with our squires, leaving Master Hortain to have his own way in the unloading." The horses both of knights and squires were speedily lowered into a broad lighter, and reached the shore almost as soon as their masters. Sir Nigel bent his knee devoutly as he put foot on land, and taking a small black patch from his bosom, he bound it tightly over his left eye. "May the blessed George and the memory of my sweet lady-love raise high my heart," quoth he. "And as a token I vow that I will not take this patch from my eye until I have seen something of this country of Spain, and done such a small deed as it lies in me to do. And this I swear upon the cross of my sword, and upon the glove of my lady." "In truth, you take me back 20 years, Nigel," quoth Sir Oliver, as they mounted and rode slowly through the Watergate. "After Cadsand, I deemed that the French thought that we were an army of the blind, for there was scarce a man who had not closed an eye for the greater love and honour of his lady. Yet it goes hard with you that you should darken one side, when with both open you can scarce tell a horse from a mule. In truth, friend, I think that you step over the line of reason in this matter." "Sir Oliver Buttersthorn," said the little knight shortly, "I would have you to understand that, blind as I am, I can yet see the path of honour very clearly, and that is a road upon which I do not crave another man's guidance." "By my soul," said Sir Oliver, "you are as tired as verjuice this morning. If you are bent upon a quarrel with me, I must leave you to your humour, and drop into the tete door here, for I mark a varlet pass the door who bare a smoking dish, which had, methought, a most excellent smell." "Nenny, Nenny," cried his comrade, laying his hand upon his knee, "we have known each other overlong to fall out, Oliver, like two raw pages at their first approves. You must come with me first to the prince, and then back to the hostel, though sure I am that it would grieve his heart that any gentle cavalier should turn from his board to a common tavern. But is not that my Lord Delaware who waves to us? Ha! My fair lord, God and our Lady be with you. And there's Sir Robert Cheney." Good morrow, Rubbit. I am right glad to see you. The two knights walked their horses abreast, while Alleyne and Ford, with John Norbury, who was squire to Sir Oliver, kept some paces behind them, a spear's length in front of Black Simon and of the Winchester guidon-bearer. Norbury, a lean, silent man, had been to those parts before, and set his horse with a rigid neck. But the two young squires gazed eagerly to right or left, and plucked each other's sleeve to call attention to the many strange things on every side of them. "See to the brave stalls," cried Alleyne. "See to the noble armour set forth, and the costly taffeta. And oh, Ford, see to where the scrivener sits with the pigments and the inkhorns, and the rolls of sheepskin as white as the Beaulieu napery. Saw man ever the like before? Nay, man, there are finer stalls in Cheapside," answered Ford, whose father had taken him to London on occasion of one of the Smithfield joustings. "I have seen a silversmith's booth there which would serve to buy either side of this street. But mark these houses, Alleyne, how they thrust forth upon the top, and see to the coats of arms at every window, and banner or pencil on the roof." "And the churches," cried Alleyne. "The priory at Christchurch was a noble pile, but it was cold and bay, methinks, by one of these, with their frettings, and their carvings, and their traceries, as though some great ivy plant of stone had curled and wantoned over the walls." "And hark to the speech of the folk," said Ford. "Was ever such a hissing and clacking? I wonder that they have not wit to learn English now that they have come under the English crown. By Richard of Hampole, there are fair faces amongst them. See the wench with the brown wimple. Out on you, Alleyne, that you would rather gaze upon dead stone than on living flesh." It was little wonder that the richness and ornament, not only of church and of stall, but of every private house as well, should have impressed itself upon the young squires. The town was now at the height of its fortunes. Besides its trade and its armors, other causes had combined to pour wealth into it. War, which had wrought evil upon so many fair cities around, had brought naught but good to this one. As her French sisters decayed, she increased, for here, from north, and from east, and from south, came the plunder to be sold and the ransom money to be spent. Through all her 16 landward gates they had set for many years a double tide of empty-handed soldiers hurrying Francewards, and of enriched and laden bands who brought their spoils home. The prince's court, too, with its swarm of noble barons and wealthy knights, many of whom, in imitation of their master, had brought their ladies and their children from England, all helped to swell the coffers of the burghers. Now, with this fresh influx of noblemen and cavaliers, food and lodging were scarce to be had, and the prince was hurrying forward his forces to Dax in Gascony to relieve the overcrowding of his capital. In front of the Minster and Abbey of St. Andrews was a large square crowded with priests, soldiers, women, friars, and burghers, who made their common centre for sightseeing and gossip. Amid the knot of noisy and gesticulating townsfolk, many small parties of mounted knights and squires threaded their way towards the prince's quarters, where the huge iron-clamped doors were thrown back to show that he held audience within. 20 archers stood about the gateway, and beat back from time to time with their bow-staves the inquisitive and chattering crowd who swarmed round the portal. 2 knights in full armour, with lances raised and closed visors, set their horses on either side, while in the centre, with 2 pages to attend upon him, there stood a noble-faced man in flowing purple gown, who pricked off upon a sheet of parchment the style and title of each applicant, marshalling them in their due order, and giving to each the place and facility which his rank demanded. His long white beard and searching eyes imparted to him an air of masterful dignity, which was increased by his tabard-like vesture and the heraldic barret cap, with triple plume which bespoke his office. "It is Sir William de Pakington, the prince's own herald and scrivener," whispered Sir Nigel, as they pulled up amid the line of knights who waited admission. "Ill faze it with the man who would venture to deceive him. He hath by rote the name of every knight of France or of England, and all the tree of his family, with his kinships, coat armour, marriages, augmentations, abatements, and I know not what beside. We may leave our horses here with the varlets, and push forward with our squires." Following Sir Nigel's counsel, they pressed on upon foot until they were close to the prince's secretary, who was in high debate with a young and foppish knight, who was bent upon making his way past him. "Mackworth," said the king-at-arms, It is in my mind, young sir, that you have not been presented before. Nay, it is but a day since I set foot in Bordeaux, but I feared lest the prince should think it strange that I had not waited upon him. The prince hath other things to think upon, quoth Sir William de Pakington. But if you be a Mackworth, you must be a Mackworth of Normanton, and indeed I see now that your coat is sable and ermine. I am a Mackworth of Normanton. The other answered, with some uneasiness of manner, Then you must be Sir Stephen Mackworth, for I learned that when old Sir Guy died he came in for the arms and the name, the war cry, and the profit. Sir Stephen is my elder brother, and I am Arthur, the second son, said the youth. In sooth and in sooth, cried the king-at-arms with scornful eyes. And pray, Sir second son, where is the cadency mark which should mark your rank? Dare you to wear your brother's coat without the crescent which should stamp you as his cadet? Away to your lodgings, and come not nigh the prince until the armour hath placed the true charge upon your shield. As the youth withdrew in confusion, Sir William's keen eye singled out the 5 red roses from amid the overlapping shields and cloud of pennons which face him. How? He cried, there are charges here which are above counterfeit. The roses of Loring and the boar's head of Buttersthorn may stand back in peace, but by my faith, they are not to be held back in war. Welcome, Sir Oliver, Sir Nigel. Chandos will be glad to his very heart roots when he sees you. This way, my fair sirs. Your squires are doubtless worthy the fame of their masters. Down this passage, Sir Oliver, Edricson. Ha! One of the old strain of Hampshire Edricsons, I doubt not. And forward, they are of a South Saxon stock, and of good repute. There are Norburys in Cheshire and in Wiltshire, and also, as I have heard, upon the borders. So, my fair sirs, and I shall see that you are shortly admitted. He had finished his professional commentary by flinging open a folding door and ushering the party into a broad hall, which was filled with a great number of people who were waiting, like themselves, for an audience. The room was very spacious, lighted on one side by 3 arched and mullioned windows, while opposite was a huge fireplace in which a pile of faggots was blazing merrily. Many of the company had crowded round the flames, for the weather was bitterly cold, but the 2 knights seated themselves upon a bancal, with their squires standing behind them. Looking down the room, Alleyne marked that both floor and ceiling were of the richest oak, the latter spanned by 12 arching beams, which were adorned at either end by the lilies and the lions of the royal arms. On the further side was a small door, on each side of which stood men-at-arms. From time to time an elderly man in black with rounded shoulders and a long white wand in his hand came softly forth from his inner room, and beckoned to one or other of the company, who doffed cap and followed him. The 2 knights were deep in talk, when Alleyne became aware of a remarkable individual who was walking round the room in their direction. As he passed each knot of cavaliers, every head turned to look after him, and it was evident, from bows and respectful salutations on all sides, that the interest which he excited was not due merely to his strange personal appearance. He was tall and straight as a lance, though of a great age, for his hair, which curled from under his velvet cap of maintenance, was as white as the new-fallen snow. Yet, from the swing of his stride and the spring of his step, it was clear that he had not yet lost the fire and activity of his youth. His fierce hawk-like face was clean-shaven like that of a priest, save for a long, thin wisp of white moustache which drooped down halfway to his shoulder. That he had been handsome might be easily judged from his high aquiline nose and clear-cut chin, but his features had been so distorted by the seams and scars of old wounds, and by the loss of one eye which had been torn from the socket, that there was little left to remind one of the dashing young knight, who had been 50 years ago the fairest as well as the boldest of the English chivalry. Yet what knight was there in that whole of St. Andrews who would not have gladly laid down youth, beauty, and all that he possessed to win the fame of this man? For who could be named with Chandos, the stainless knight, the wise counsellor, the valiant warrior, the hero of Cressy, of Winchelsea, of Poictiers, of Boree, and of as many other battles as there were years to his life? How! My little heart of gold, he cried, darting forward suddenly and throwing his arms round Sir Nigel. I heard that you were here and have been seeking you. My fair and dear lord, said the knight, returning the warrior's embrace, I have indeed come back to you, for where else shall I go that I may learn to be a gentle and a hardy knight? By my troth, said Chandos with a smile. "It is very fitting that we should be companions, Nigel, for since you have tied up one of your eyes, and I have had the mischance to lose one of mine, we have but a pair between us. Ah, Sir Oliver, you were on the blind side of me, and I saw you not. A wise woman had made prophecy that this blind side will one day be the death of me. We shall go into the prince anon, but in truth he hath much upon his hands, for what with Pedro, and the king of Majorca, and the king of Navarre, who is no 2 days of the same mind, and the Gascon barons who are all chaffering for terms like so many hucksters, he hath an uneasy part to play. But how left you the Lady Loring? She was well, my fair lord, and sent her service and greetings to you. I am ever her knight and slave, and your journey, I trust that it was pleasant, as heart could wish. We had sight of 2 rover galleys, and even came to have some slight bickering with them. Ever in luck's way, Nigel, quoth Sir John, we must hear the tale anon, but I deem it best that ye should leave your squires and come with me, for, howsoever pressed the prince may be, I am very sure that he would be loath to keep 2 old comrades in arms upon the further side of the door. Follow close behind me, and I will forestall old Sir William, though I can scarce promise to roll forth your style and rank as is his wont." So saying, he led the way to the inner chamber, the 2 companions treading close at his heels, and nodding to right and left as they caught sight of familiar faces among the crowd. Chapter 19. How there was stir at the Abbey of St. Andrews. The prince's reception room, although of no great size, was fitted up with all the state and luxury which the fame and power of its owner demanded. A high dais at the further end was roofed by a broad canopy of scarlet velvet spangled with silver fleur-de-lis, and supported at either corner by silver rods. This was approached by 4 steps carpeted with the same material, while all round were scattered rich cushions, oriental mats, and costly rugs of fur. The choicest tapestries which the looms of Arras could furnish draped the walls, whereon the battles of Judas Maccabeus were set forth, with the Jewish warriors in plate of proof, with crest and lance and banderole, as the naive artists of the day were wont to depict them. A few rich settles and bancos, choicely carved and decorated with glazed leather hangings of the sort termed a bassain, completed the furniture of the apartment, save that at one side of the dais there stood a lofty perch, upon which a cast of 3 solemn Prussian gerfalcons sat, hooded and jesseled, as silent and motionless as the royal fowler who stood beside them. In the center of the dais were 2 very high chairs with dorserets, which arched forwards over the heads of the occupants, the whole covered with light blue silk thickly powdered with golden stars. On that to the right sat a very tall and well-formed man with red hair, a livid face, and a cold blue eye, which had in it something peculiarly sinister and menacing. He lounged back in a careless position, and yawned repeatedly as though heartily weary of the proceedings, stooping from time to fondle a shaggy Spanish greyhound which lay stretched at his feet. On the other throne there was perched bolt upright, with prim demeanor, as though he felt himself to be upon his good behavior, a little, round, pippin-faced person, who smiled and bobbed to every one whose eye he chanced to meet. Between and a little in front of them on a humble charrette or stool sat a slim, dark young man, whose quiet attire and modest manner would scarce proclaim him to be the most noted prince in Europe. A jupon of dark blue cloth, tagged with buckles and pendants of gold, same but a sombre and plain attire amidst the wealth of silken ermine and gilt tissue of fustian with which he was surrounded. He sat with his 2 hands clasped round his knee, his head slightly bent, and an expression of impatience and of trouble upon his clear, well-chiseled features. Behind the thrones there stood 2 men in purple gowns, with ascetic, clean-shaven faces, and half a dozen other high dignitaries and office-holders of Aquitaine. Below, on either side of the steps, were 40 or 50 barons, knights, and courtiers, ranged in a triple row to the right and the left, with a clear passage in the center. "There sits the prince," whispered Sir John Chandos, as they entered. "He on the right is Pedro, whom we are about to put upon the Spanish throne. The other is Don James, whom we purpose with the aid of God to help to his throne in Majorca. Now follow me, and take it not to heart if he be a little short in his speech, for indeed his mind is full of many very weighty concerns." The prince, however, had already observed their entrance, and, springing to his feet, he had advanced with a winning smile and the light of welcome in his eyes. "We do not need your good offices as herald here," Sir John, said he in a low but clear voice, these valiant knights are very well known to me. Welcome to Aquitaine, Sir Nigel Loring and Sir Oliver Butterstone. Nay, keep your knee for my sweet father at Windsor. I would have your hands, my friends. We are like to give you some work to do ere you see the downs of Hampshire once more. Know you aught of Spain, Sir Oliver? Naught, my sire, save that I have heard men say that there is a dish named an olla which is prepared there, though I have never been clear in my mind as to whether it was but a ragout such as is to be found in the south, or whether there is some seasoning such as fennel or garlic which is peculiar to Spain. Your doubts, Sir Oliver, shall soon be resolved, answered the prince, laughing heartily, as did many of the barons who surrounded them. His Majesty here will doubtless order that you have this dish hotly seasoned when we are all safely in Castile. I will have a hotly seasoned dish for some folk I know of, answered Don Pedro with a cold smile. But my friend Sir Oliver can fight right heartily without either bite or sup, remarked the prince. Did I not see him at Poictiers, when for 2 days we had not more than a crust of bread and a cup of foul water, yet carrying himself most valiantly? With my own eyes I saw him in the rout sweep the head from a knight of Picari with one blow of his sword. The rogue got between me and the nearest French Vidalwain, muttered Sir Oliver, amid a fresh titter from those who were near enough to catch his words. How many have you in your train? Asked the prince, assuming a graver mien. I have 40 men-at-arms, sire, said Sir Oliver, and I have 100 archers and a score of lancers. But there are 200 men who wait for me on this side of the water upon the borders of Navarre. And who are they, Sir Nigel? They are a free company, sire, and they are called the White Company. To the astonishment of the knight, his words provoke a burst of merriment from the barons round, in which the 2 kings and the prince were fain to join. Sir Nigel blinked mildly from one to the other, until at last perceiving a stout black-bearded knight at his elbow, whose laugh rang somewhat louder than the others, he touched him lightly upon the sleeve. Perchance, my fair sir, he whispered, there is some small vow which I may relieve you. Might we not have some honourable debate upon the matter? Your gentle courtesy may perhaps grant me an exchange of thrusts. Nay, nay, Sir Nigel, cried the prince, fasten not the offence upon Sir Robert Briquet, for we are one and all bogged in the same mire. Truth to say, our ears have just been vexed by the doings of the same company, and I have even now made vow to hang the man who held the rank of captain over it. I little thought to find him among the bravest of my own chosen chieftains. But the vow is now naught, for, as you have never seen your company, it would be a fool's act to blame you for their doings. My liege, said Sir Nigel, it is a very small matter that I should be hanged, albeit the manner of death is somewhat more ignoble than I had hoped for. On the other hand, it would be a very grievous thing that you, the Prince of England and the flower of knighthood, should make a vow, whether in ignorance or no, and fail to bring it to fulfillment. Vex not your mind on that, the prince answered, smiling. We had a citizen from Montauban here this very day, who told us such a tale of second murder and pillage that it moved our blood, but our wrath was turned upon the man who was in authority over them. My dear and honoured master, cried Nigel, in great anxiety, I fear me much that in your gentleness of heart you are straining this vow which you have taken. If there be so much as a shadow of a doubt as to the form of it, it were 1,000 times best. Peace, peace, cried the prince impatiently. I am very well able to look to my own vows and their performance. We hope to see you both in the banquet hall anon. Meanwhile you will attend upon us with our train. He bowed, and Chandos, plucking Sir Oliver by the sleeve, led them both away to the back of the press of courtiers. Why, little coz, he whispered, you are very eager to have your neck in a noose. By my soul, had you asked as much from our new ally Don Pedro, he had not balked you. Between friends, there is overmuch of the hangman in him, and too little of the prince. But indeed this White Company is a rough band, and may take some handling ere you find yourself safe in your captaincy. I doubt not, with the help of St. Paul, that I shall bring them to some order, Sir Nigel answered. But there are many faces here which are new to me, though others have been before me since first I waited upon my dear master, Sir Walter. I pray you to tell me, Sir John, who are these priests upon the dais? The one is the Archbishop of Bordeaux, Nigel, and the other the Bishop of Agen. And the dark knight with grey-streaked beard? By my troth, he seems to be a man of much wisdom and valour. He is Sir William Felton, who, with my unworthy self, is the chief counsellor of the prince, he being high steward and I the seneschal of Aquitaine. And the knights upon the right, beside Don Pedro. They are cavaliers of Spain who have followed him in his exile. The one at his elbow is Fernando de Castro, who is as brave and true a man as heart could wish. In front to the right are the Gascon lords. You may well tell them by their clouded brows, for there have been some ill will of late betwixt the prince and them. The tall and burly man is the Captal de Butch, whom I doubt not that you know, for a braver knight never laid lance in rest. That heavy-faced cavalier who plucks his skirts and whispers in his ear is Lord Oliver de Clisson, known also as the Butcher. He it is who stirs up strife, and forever blows the dying embers into flame. The man with the mole upon his cheek is the Lord Pummers, and his two brothers stand behind him, with the Lord Lesparre, Lord de Rosam, Lord de Mucident, Sir Perducas de Albret, the Soldich de la Train, and others. Further back are knights from Quercy, Limousin, Saintonge, Poitou, and Aquitaine, with the valiant Sir Giscard d'Angle, that is he in the rose-coloured doublet with the ermine. And the knights upon this side, they are all Englishmen, some of the household and others who, like yourself, are captains of companies. There is Lord Neville, Sir Stephen Cussington, and Sir Matthew Gorney, with Sir Walter Hewitt, Sir Thomas Banastre, and Sir Thomas Felton, who is the brother of the High Steward. Mark well the man with the high nose and flaxen beard who hath placed his hand upon the shoulder of the dark, hard-faced cavalier in the rust-stained jupon. Aye, by St. Paul, observes Sir Nigel, they both bear the print of their armour upon their coats' hardies. Methinks they are men who breathe freer in a camp than a court. There are many of us who do that, Nigel, said Chandos, and the head of the court is, I dare warrant, among them. But of these two men, the one is Sir Hugh Calverley, and the other is Sir Robert Knowles. Sir Nigel and Sir Oliver craned their necks to have a clearer view of these famous warriors, the one a chosen leader of free companies, the other a man who by his fierce valour and energy had raised himself in the lowest ranks until he was second only to Chandos himself in the esteem of the army. He hath no light hand in war, of Sir Robert, said Chandos. If he passes through a country, you may tell it for some years to come. I have heard that in the north it is still the use to call a house which are but the two gable ends left, without walls or roof, a Knowles mitre. I have often heard of him, said Nigel, and I have hoped to be so far honoured as to run a course with him. But hark, Sir John, what is amiss with the prince? Whilst Chandos had been conversing with the two knights, a continuous stream of suitors had been ushered in, adventurers seeking to sell their swords and merchants clamouring over some grievance, a ship detained for the carriage of troops, or a ton of sweet wine which had the bottom knocked out by a troop of thirsty archers. A few words from a prince disposed of each case, and, if the applicant liked not the judgment, a quick glance from the prince's dark eyes sent him to the door with the grievance all gone out of him. The younger ruler had sat listlessly upon his stool with the two puppet monarchs enthroned behind him, but of a sudden a dark shadow passed over his face, and he sprang to his feet in one of those gusts of passion which were the single blot upon his noble and generous character. "How now, Don Martin de la Cara," he cried. "How now, sirrah? What message do you bring to us from our brother of Navarre?" The newcomer to whom this abrupt query had been addressed was a tall and exceedingly handsome cavalier who had just been ushered into the apartment. His swarthy cheek and raven black hair spoke of the fiery south, and he wore his long black cloak swayed across his chest and over his shoulders in a graceful sweeping fashion, which was neither English nor French. With stately steps and many profound bows, he advanced to the foot of the dais before replying to the prince's question. "My powerful and illustrious master," he began, "Charles, King of Navarre, Earl of Evreux, Count of Champagne, who also writeth himself Overlord of Berne, hereby sends his love and greetings to his dear cousin Edward, the Prince of Wales, Governor of Aquitaine, Grand Commander of—" "Tush, tush, Don Martin," interrupted the prince, who had been beating the ground with his foot impatiently during this stately preamble. "We already know our cousin's titles and style, and, certes, we know our own. To the point, Man, and at once. Are the passes open to us? Or does your master go back from his word pledged to me at Liborn no later than last Michaelmas? It would have become my gracious master, sire, to go back from promise given. He does but ask some delay in certain conditions and hostages. Conditions? Hostages? Is he speaking to the Prince of England, or is it to the bourgeois province of some half-captured town? Conditions, quotha? He may find much to mend in his own condition ere long. The passes are, then, closed to us. Nay, sire, they are open, then. Nay, sire, if you would but— Enough, enough, Don Martin, cried the prince. It is a sorry sight to see so true a knight pleading in so false a cause. We know the doings of our cousin Charles. We know that while with the right hand he takes our 50,000 crowns to the holding of the passes open, he had his left outstretched to Henry of Trastevere, or to the King of France, all ready to take as many more for the keeping them closed. I know our good Charles, and, by my blessed name Saint Confessor, he shall learn that I know him. He sets his kingdom up to the best bidder, like some scullion farrier selling a glanded horse. He is— My lord, cried Don Martin, I cannot stand there to hear such words of my master. Did they come from other lips, I should know better how to answer them. Don Pedro frowned and curled his lip, but the prince smiled and nodded his approbation. Your bearing and your words, Don Martin, are such I should have looked for in you, he remarked. You will tell the king, your master, that he have been paid his price, and that if he holds to his promise he have my word for it that no scath shall come to his people, nor to their houses or gear. If, however, we have not his leave, I shall come close at the heels of this message without his leave, and bearing a key with me which shall open all that he may close. He stooped and whispered to Sir Robert Knowles and Sir Hugh Calverley, who smiled as men well pleased, and hastened from the room. Our cousin Charles has had experience of our friendship, the prince continued, and now, by the saints, he shall feel a touch of our displeasure. I send now a message to our cousin Charles, which his whole kingdom may read. Let him take heed lest worse befall him. Where is my lord Chandos? How? Sir John, I commend this worthy knight to your care. You will see that he has refection, and such a purse of gold as may defray his charges. For indeed it is great honour to any courtier within it so noble and gentle a cavalier. How say you, sire? He asked, turning to the Spanish refugee, while the herald of Navarre was conducted from the chamber by the old warrior. It is not our custom in Spain to reward pertness in a messenger, Don Pedro answered, patting the head of his greyhound. Yet we have all heard the lengths to which your royal generosity runs. In sooth, yes, cried the king of Majorca. Who should know it better than we, said Don Pedro bitterly, since we have had to fly to you in our trouble as to the natural protector of all who are weak. Nay, nay, as brothers to a brother, cried the prince, with sparkling eyes. We doubt not, with the help of God, to see you very soon restored to those thrones from which you have been so traitorously thrust. When that happy day comes, said Pedro, then Spain shall be to you as Aquitaine, and, be your project what it may, you may ever count on every troop and every ship over which flies the banner of Castile. And, added the other, upon every aid which the wealth and power of Majorca can bestow. Touching the 100,000 crowns in which I stand your debtor, continued Pedro carelessly, it can no doubt. Not a word, sire, not a word, cried the prince. It is not now when you are in grief that I would vex your mind with such base and sordid matters. I have said once and forever that I am yours with every bowstring of my army and every florin in my coffers. Ah, he is indeed a mirror of chivalry, said Don Pedro. I think, Sir Fernando, since the prince's bounty is stretched so far, that we may make further use of his gracious goodness to the extent of 50,000 crowns. Good Sir William Felton, he will doubtless settle the matter with you. The stout old English counsellor looked somewhat blank at this prompt acceptance of his master's bounty. If it please you, sire, he said, the public funds are at their lowest, seeing that I have paid 12,000 men of the companies, and the new taxes, the half-tax and the wine tax, not yet come in. If you could wait until the promised help from England comes. Nay, nay, my sweet cousin, cried Don Pedro. Had we known that your own coffers were so low, or that this sorry sum could have weighed one way or the other, we had been low indeed. Enough, sire, enough, said the prince, flushing with vexation. If the public funds be, indeed, so backward, Sir William, there is still, I trust, my own private credit, which had never been drawn upon for my own uses, but is now ready in the cause of a friend in adversity. Go, raise this money upon our own jewels, if naught else may serve, and see that it be paid over to Don Fernando. In security I offer, cried Don Pedro. Tush, tush, said the prince. I am not a Lombard, sire. Your kingly pledge is my security, without bond or seal. But I have tidings for you, my lords and lieges, that our brother of Lancaster is on his way for our capital with 400 lances and as many archers to aid us in our venture. When he hath come, and when our fair consort is recovered in a health, which I trust by the grace of God may be ere many weeks be past, we shall then join the army at Dax and set our banners to the breeze once more. A buzz of joy at the prospect of immediate action rose up from the group of warriors. The prince smiled at the martial ardor which shone upon every face around him. It will hearten you to know, he continued, that I have sure advices that this Henry is a very valiant leader, and that he has it in his power to make such a stand against us as promises to give us much honor and pleasure. Of his own people he hath brought together, as I learn, some 50,000, with 12,000 of the French free companies, who are, as you know, very valiant and expert men-at-arms. It is certain also that the brave and worthy Bertrand de Guesclin hath ridden into France to the Duke of Anjou, and purposes to take back with him great levies from Picardy and Brittany. We hold Bertrand in high esteem, for he has oft before been at great pains to furnish us with an honourable encounter. What think you of it, my worthy Captal? He took you at Cocherel, and, by my soul, you will have the chance now to pay that score. The Gascon warrior winced a little at the allusion, nor were his countrymen around him better pleased, for on the only occasion when they had encountered the arms of France without English aid they had met with a heavy defeat. There are some who say, sire, said the burly de Clisson, that the score is already overpaid, for that without Gascon help Bertrand had not been taken at Orry, nor had King John been overborne at Poictiers. By heaven, but this is too much, cried an English nobleman. Methinks that Gascony is too small a cock to crow so lustily. The smaller cock, my Lord Audley, may have the longer spur, remarked the Captal de Batch. May have its comb clipped if it make overmuch noise, broke in an Englishman. By Our Lady of Rocamadour, cried the Lord of Mucident, this is more than I can abide. Sir John Charnel, you shall answer to me for those words. Freely, my lord, and when you will, returned the Englishman carelessly. My Lord de Clisson, cried Lord Audley, you look somewhat fixedly in my direction. By God's soul, I should be right glad to go further into the matter with you. And you, my Lord of Pommers, said Sir Nigel, pushing his way to the front. It is in my mind that we might break a lance in gentle and honourable debate over the question. For a moment a dozen challenges flashed backwards and forwards at this sudden bursting of the cloud which had lowered so long between the knights of the two nations. Furious and gesticulating the Gascons, white and cold and sneering the English, while the prince with a half-smile glanced from one party to the other, like a man who loved to dwell upon a fiery scene, and yet dreaded lest the mischief go so far that he might find it beyond his control. Friends, friends, he cried at last, this quarrel must go no further. The man shall answer to me, be Gascon or English, who carries it beyond this room. I have overmuch need for your swords that you should turn them upon each other. Sir John Charnel, Lord Audley, you do not doubt the courage of our friends of Gascony. Not I, sire, Lord Audley answered. I have seen them fight too often not to know that they are very hardy and valiant gentlemen. And so say I, quoth the other Englishman. But, certes, there is no fear of our forgetting it while they have a tongue in their heads. Nay, Sir John, said the prince reprovingly, all peoples have their own use and customs. There are some who might call us cold and dull and silent. But you hear, my lords of Gascony, that these gentlemen had no thought to throw a slur upon your honor or your valor, so let all anger fade from your mind. Clisson, Captal, de Pommers, I have your word. We are your subjects, sire, said the Gascon barons, though with no very good grace. Your word's our law. Then shall we bury all cause of unkindness in a flagon of Malvoisie, said the prince, cheerily. Ho, there, the doors of the banquet hall. I have been overlong from my sweet spouse, but I shall be back with you anon. Let the sirs serve and the minstrels play, while we drain a cup to the brave days that are before us in the south. He turned away, accompanied by the two monarchs, while the rest of the company, with many a compressed lip and menacing eye, filed slowly through the side door to the great chamber in which the royal tables were set forth. Chapter 20. How Alleyne won his place in an honorable guild. Whilst the prince's council was sitting, Alleyne and Ford had remained in the outer hall, where they were soon surrounded by a noisy group of young Englishmen of their own rank, all eager to hear the latest news from England. How is it with the old man at Windsor? Asked one. And how with the good Queen Philippa? And how with Dame Alice Purse? Cried a third. The devil take your tongue. What? Shouted a tall young man, seizing the last speaker by the collar and giving him an admonitory shake. The prince would take your head off for those words. By God's coif, what would miss it but little? Said another. It is as empty as a beggar's wallet. As empty as an English squire, 'cause, cried the first speaker, what a devil has become of the maid at his stables and his sirs? They have not put forth the trestles yet. Mon Dieu, if a man could eat himself into knighthood, Humphrey, you had been a banneret at the least, observe another, amid a burst of laughter. And if you could drink yourself in, old Leatherhead, you had been first baron of the realm, cried the aggrieved Humphrey. But how of England, my lads of Loring? I take it, said Ford, that it is much as it was when you were there last, say that perchance there's a little less noise there. And why less noise, young Solomon? Ah, that is for your wit to discover. Pardieu, here is a paladin come over, with a Hampshire mud still sticking to his shoes. He means that the noise is less for our being out of the country. They are very quick in these parts, said Ford, turning to Alleyne. How are we to take this, sir? Asked the ruffling squire. You may take it as it comes, said Ford carelessly. Here is pertness, cried the other. So, I honor your truthfulness, said Ford. Stand it, Humphrey, said the tall squire with a burst of laughter. You will have little credit from this gentleman, I perceive. Tongues are sharp in Hampshire, sir. And swords? We may prove that. In 2 days' time is the Vepres du Tournoi, when we may see if your lance is as quick as your wit. Oh, very well, Roger Harcombe, cried a burly, bull-necked young man, whose square shoulders and massive limbs told of exceptional personal strength. You pass too lightly over the matter. We are not to be so easily overcrowed. The Lord Loring hath given his proofs, but we know nothing of his squires, save that one of them hath a railing tongue. And how of you, young sir, bringing his heavy hand down on Alleyne's shoulder. And what of me, young sir? Ma foi, this is my lady's page come over. Your cheek will be browner and your hand harder ere you see your mother again. If my hand is not hard, it is ready. Ready? Ready for what? For the hem of my lady's train. Ready to chastise insolence. Sir, cried Alleyne with flashing eyes. Sweet little coz, answered the burly squire. Such a dainty colour, such a mellow voice, eyes of a bashful maid, and hair like a 3 years babe. Voila. He passed his thick fingers roughly through the youth's crisp golden curls. You seek to force a quarrel, sir, said the young man, white with anger. And what then? Why, you do it like a country boor, and not like a gentle squire. A spinel bred, and as ill taught. I serve a master who could show you how such things should be done. And how would he do it, O pink of squires? He would neither be loud nor would he be unmannerly, but rather more gentle than is his wont. He would say, Sir, I should take it as an honour to do some small deed of arms against you, not for mine own glory or advancement, but rather for the fame of my lady and for the upholding of chivalry. Then he would draw his glove, thus, and throw it on the ground, or, if he had cause to think that he had to deal with a chill, he might throw it in his face, as I do now. A buzz of excitement went up from a knot of squires as Alleyne, his gentle nature turned by this causeless attack into fiery resolution, dashed his glove with all his strength into the sneering face of his antagonist. From all parts of the whole squires and pages came running, until a dense, swaying crowd surrounded the disputants. "You'll lie for this," said the bully, with a face which was distorted with rage. "If you can take it," returned Alleyne. "Good lad," whispered Ford. "Stick to it close as wax." "I shall see justice," cried Norbury, Sir Oliver's silent attendant. "You brought it upon yourself, John Tranter," said the tall squire, who had been addressed as Roger Harkham. "You must ever plague the newcomers. But it was shame if this went further. The lad has shown a proper spirit." "But a blow, cried several of the older squires. "There must be a finish to this." "Nay, Tranter first laid hand upon his head," said Harkham. "How say you, Tranter? The matter may rest where it stands." "My name is known in these parts," said Tranter, proudly. "I can let pass what might leave a stain upon another. Let him pick up his glove, and say that he has done amiss." "I would see him in the claws of the devil first," whispered Ford. "You hear, young sir," said the peacemaker. "Our friend will overlook the matter if you do but say that you have acted in heat and haste." "I cannot say that," answered Alleyne. "It is our custom, young sir, when new squires come amongst us from England, to test them in some such way. Bethink you that if a man have a destree or new lance, he will ever try it in time of peace, lest in days of need it may fail him. How much more then is it proper to test those who are our comrades in arms?" "I would draw out if it may honorably be done," murmured Norbury in Alleyne's ear. "The man is a noted swordsman and far above your strength." Edricson came, however, of that sturdy Saxon blood which is very slowly heated, but once up not easily to be cooled. The hint of danger which Norbury threw out was the one thing needed to harden his resolution. "I came here at the back of my master," he said, "and I looked on every man here as an Englishman and a friend. This gentleman has shown me a rough welcome, and if I have answered him in the same spirit, he has but himself to thank. I will pick the glove up, but, certes, I shall abide what I have done unless he first crave my pardon for what he has said and done." Tranter shrugged his shoulders. "You have done what you could to save him. Harkham," said he, "we had best settle at once." "So say I," cried Alleyne. "The council will not break up until the banquet," remarked a grey-haired squire. "You have a clear 2 hours." "And the place?" "The tilting yard is empty at this hour." "Nay, it must not be within the ground of the court, or it may go hard with all concerned if it come to the ears of the prince." "But there's a quiet spot near the river," said one youth. "We are but to pass through the abbey grounds, along the army wall, past the church of St. Remy, and so down the rue des Apôtres." "In event, then," cried Tranter shortly, and the whole assembly flocked out into the open air, save only those whom the special orders of their masters held to their posts. These unfortunates crowded to the small casements, and craned their necks after the throng as far as they could catch a glimpse of them. Close to the banks of the Garonne there lay a little tract of green sward, with a high wall of a prior's garden upon one side, and an orchard with a thick bristle of leafless apple trees upon the other. The river ran deep and swift up to the steep bank, but there were few boats upon it, and the ships were moored far out in the centre of the stream. Here the 2 combatants drew their swords and threw off their doublets, for neither had any defensive armor. The duello with its stately etiquette had not yet come into vogue, but rough and sudden encounters were as common as they must ever be when hot-headed youth goes abroad with a weapon strapped to its waist. In such combats, as well as in the more formal sports of the tilting yard, Tranter had won a name for strength and dexterity which had caused Norbury to utter his well-meant warning. On the other hand, Alleyne had used his weapons in constant exercise and practice on every day for many months, and being by nature quick of eye and prompt of hand, he might pass now as no mean swordsman. A strangely opposed pair they appeared as they approached each other, Tranter dark and stout and stiff, with hairy chest and corded arms. Alleyne a model of comeliness and grace, with his golden hair and his skin as fair as a woman's. An unequal fight it seemed to most, but there were a few, and they the most experienced, who saw something in the youth's steady grey eye and wary step, which left the issue open to doubt. "Hold, sirs, hold," cried Norbury, ere a blow had been struck. "This gentleman of the two-handed sword, a good foot longer than that of our friend." "Take mine," Alleyne said forward. "Nay, friends," he answered, "I understand the weight and balance of mine own. To work, sir, for our Lord may need us at the Abbey." Tranter's great sword was indeed a mighty vantage in his favour. He stood with his feet close together, his knees bent outwards, ready for a dash inwards or spring out. The weapon he held straight up in front of him with blade erect, so that he might either bring it down with a swinging blow, or by a turn of the heavy blade he might guard his own head and body. A further protection lay in the broad and powerful guard which crossed the hilt, and which was furnished with a deep and narrow notch, in which an expert swordsman might catch his foeman's blade, and by a quick turn of his wrist might snap it across. Alleyne, on the other hand, must trust for his defence to his quick eye and active foot, for his sword, though keen as a whetstone could make it, was of a light and graceful build with a narrow, sloping pommel and a tapering steel. Tranter well knew his advantage and lost no time in putting it to use. As his opponent walked towards him, he suddenly bounded forward and sent in a whistling cut which would have severed the other in twain had he not sprung lightly back from it. So close was it that the point ripped a gash in the jutting edge of his linen cyclist. Quick as a panther, Alleyne sprang in with a thrust, but Tranter, who was as active as he was strong, had already recovered himself and turned it aside with a movement of his heavy blade. Again he whizzed a blow which made the spectators hold their breath, and again Alleyne very quickly and swiftly slipped from under it, and sent back two lightning thrusts which the other could scarce parry. So close were they to each other that Alleyne had no time to spring back from the next cut, which beat down his sword and grazed his forehead, sending the blood streaming into his eyes and down his cheeks. He sprang out beyond sword sweep, and the pair stood breathing heavily, while a crowd of young squires buzzed their applause. "Bravely struck on both sides," cried Roger Harkham. "You have both won honour from this meeting, and it would be sin and shame to let it go further." "You have done enough, Edricson," said Norbury. "You have carried yourself well," cried several of the older squires. "For my part, I have no wish to slay this young man," said Tranter, wiping his heated brow. "Does this gentleman crave my pardon for having used me despitefully?" asked Alleyne. "Nay, not I." "Then stand on your guard, sir." With a clatter and dash the two blades met once more, Alleyne pressing in so as to keep within the full sweep of the heavy blade, while Tranter as continually sprang back to have space for one of his fatal cuts. A three-parts parried blow drew blood from Alleyne's left shoulder, but at the same moment he wounded Tranter slightly upon the thigh. Next instant, however, his blade had slipped into the fatal notch. There was a sharp cracking sound with a tinkling upon the ground, and he found a splintered piece of steel 15 inches long was all that remained to him of his weapon. "Your life is in my hands," cried Tranter, with a bitter smile. "Nay, nay, he makes submission," broke in several squires. "Another sword," cried Ford. "Nay, sir," said Harkham, "that is not the custom." "Throw down your hilt, Edricson," cried Norbury. "Never," said Alleyne. "Do you crave my pardon, sir?" "You are mad to ask it." "Then on guard again," cried the young squire, and sprang in with a fire and a fury which more than made up for the shortness of his weapon. It had not escaped him that his opponent was breathing in short, hoarse gasps, like a man who is dizzy with fatigue. Now was the time for the purer living and the more agile limb to show their value. Back and back gave Tranter, ever seeking time for a last cut. On and on came Alleyne, his jagged point now at his foeman's face, now at his throat, now at his chest, still stabbing and thrusting to pass the line of steel which covered him. Yet his experienced foeman knew well that such efforts could not be long sustained. Let him relax for one instant, and his death blow had come. Relax he must. Flesh and blood could not stand the strain. Already the thrusts were less fierce, the foot less ready, although there was no abatement of the spirit in the steady grey eyes. Tranter, cunning and wary from years of fighting, knew that his chance had come. He brushed aside the frail weapon which was opposed to him, whirled up his great blade, sprang back to get the fairer sweep, and vanished into the waters of the Garonne. So intent had the squires, both combatants and spectators, been on the matter in hand, that all thought of the steep bank and swift still stream had gone from their minds. It was not until Tranter, giving back before the other's fiery rush, was upon the very brink, that a general cry warned him of his danger. That last spring, which he hoped would have brought the fight to a bloody end, carried him clear of the edge, and he found himself in an instant 8 feet deep in the ice-cold stream. Once and twice his gasping face and clutching fingers broke up through the still green water, sweeping outwards in the swirl of the current. In vain were sword sheaths, apple branches, and belts linked together thrown out to him by his companions. Alleyne had dropped his shattered sword and was standing, trembling in every limb, with his rage all changed in an instant to pity. For the third time the drowning man came to the surface, his hands full of green, slimy water plants, his eyes turned in despair to the shore. Their glance fell upon Alleyne, and he could not withstand the mute appeal which he read in them. In an instant he, too, was in the Garonne, striking out with powerful strokes for his late foeman. Yet the current was swift and strong, and, good swimmer as he was, it was no easy task which Alleyne had set himself. To clutch at Tranter and to seize him by the hair was the work of a few seconds, but to hold his head above water and to make their way out of the current was another matter. For 100 strokes he did not seem to gain an inch. Then at last, amid a shout of joy and praise from the bank, they slowly drew clear into more stagnant water, at the instant that a rope, made of a dozen sword belts linked together by the buckles, was thrown by Ford into their very hands. 3 pulls from eager arms, and the 2 combatants, dripping and pale, were dragged up a bank and lay panting upon the grass. John Tranter was the first to come to himself, for although he had been longer in the water, he had done nothing during that fierce battle with the current. He staggered to his feet and looked down upon his rescuer, who had raised himself upon his elbow, and was smiling faintly at the buzz of congratulation and a praise which broke from the squires around him. "I am much beholden to you, sir," said Tranter, though in no very friendly voice. "Certes, I should have been in the river now but for you, for I was born in Warwickshire, which is but a dry county, and there are few swim in those parts." "I ask no thanks," Alleyne answered shortly. "Give me your hand to rise, Ford." "The river has been my enemy," said Tranter, "but it has been a good friend to you, for it has saved your life this day." "That is as it may be," returned Alleyne. "But all is now well over," quoth Harkham, "and no scath come of it, which is more than I had at one time hoped for. Our young friend here hath very fairly and honestly earned his right to be craftsman of the honourable guild of the Squires of Bordeaux. Here is your doublet, Tranter." "Alas for my poor sword which lies at the bottom of the Garonne," said the squire. "Here is your poor point, Edricson," cried Norbury. "Throw it over your shoulders, that you may have at least one dry garment." "And now away back to the abbey," said several. "One moment, sirs," cried Alleyne, who was leaning on Ford's shoulder, with a broken sword, which he had picked up, still clutched in his right hand. "My ears may be somewhat dulled by the water, and perchance what has been said has escaped me, but I have not yet heard this gentleman crave pardon for the insults which he put upon me in the hall." "What? Do you still pursue the quarrel?" asked Tranter. "And why not, sir? I am slow to take up such things, but once afoot I shall follow it while I have life or breath." "My for I, you have not too much of either, for you are as white as marble," said Harkham bluntly. "Take my reed, sir, and let it drop, for you have come very well out from it." "Nay," said Alleyne, "this quarrel is none of my making, but, now that I am here, I swear to you that I shall never leave the spot until I have that which I have come for, so ask my pardon, sir, or choose another glaive into it again." The young squire was deadly white from his exertions, both on the land and in the water, soaking and stained, with a smear of blood on his white shoulder and another on his brow. There was still in his whole pose and set of face the trace of an inflexible resolution. His opponent's duller and more material mind quailed before the fire and intensity of a higher spiritual nature. I had not thought that you had taken it so amiss, said he awkwardly. It was but such a jest as we play upon each other, and, if you must have it so, I am sorry for it. Then I am sorry too, quoth Alleyne warmly, and here is my hand upon it. And the nun-meat horn has blown 3 times, quoth Harkham, as they all streamed in chattering groups from the ground. I know not what the prince's maître de cuisine will say or think. By my troth, Master Ford, your friend here is in need of a cup of wine, for he hath drunk deeply of Garonne water. I had not thought from his fair face that he had stewed to this matter so shrewdly. Faith, said Ford, this air Bordeaux hath turned our turtle dove into a gamecock. A milder or more courteous youth never came out of Hampshire. His master also, as I understand, is a very mild and courteous gentleman, remarked Harkham. Yet I do not think that they are either of the men with whom it is very safe to trifle.